Ethan opens his eyes and sees wooden beams covered in soot. His hand reaches for his phone in his pocket, but his fingers bump into a clay mug. The mug falls to the floor and shatters into 3 pieces. The sound is hollow and damp, not like a hospital, not like a city. Ethan raises his hand to his face and sees someone else's fingers, young, thin, with ink stains on the pads and a callus on the middle finger from a pen. This isn't his hand. It's the hand of a man who has spent his whole life writing and drawing. Ethan sits up in bed and hits the back of his head against the low ceiling. The pain is real, not a dream. A stranger's memory flashes through his mind, as if someone had poured a bucket of ice-cold water straight into his skull. Name: Ethan Reed. Age: 26. Location: Marrowport. Occupation: former junior apprentice in the Cartographer's Guild. Former because he was fired this morning. 4 copper coins in his pocket. Outside the window, seagulls are squawking in a language he never learned, yet he understands every word. The smell of fish wafts up from below so strongly that his eyes water. He rents a corner room above a fish stall. He owes the landlady 2 months' rent. His parents are dead. He has no friends. It's been raining outside for 3 days, and the sky is the color of old lead. Ethan sits on a stranger's bed, in a stranger's body, in a stranger's world, and the only thing that comes to his mind is a single thought. All right, let's see what we've got here. On the table by the wall lies a scrap of parchment. Half a line drawn in brown ink extends to the edge of the sheet and breaks off. No title, no legend, no scale grid, just a line leading nowhere. Ethan picks up the scrap and holds it up to the light streaming in from the window. The ink is old, at least 50 years old. The parchment has been cut with a knife. Someone deliberately cut off the other half. His memory tells him that he bought this scrap yesterday from a drunk old man at the market for his last silver coin. Why he bought it is unknown. His old memory is silent. But his new memory, the one from another life, speaks clearly. This line is a mountain range. The curve corresponds to an elevation of 2,000 to 3,500 meters. The slope faces northeast. The rock is most likely limestone, judging by the nature of the erosion patterns. Ethan places the scrap of paper on the table. A quill lies next to it on the table. A simple goose quill with a nib that's been gnawed down. Next to it is a clay inkwell with traces of black ink at the bottom. Ethan looks at the line. It's 2 inches from the edge of the parchment. The line breaks off as it rises. If this is a ridge, it must continue northeast for at least another 4 miles on the map and end at a pass. Any ridge with this angle of inclination and this type of rock has a pass. This isn't a guess, it's geodesy. Ethan picks up the quill. He dips it into the inkwell. His hand doesn't tremble. He extends the line further. 2 inches. An ascent, a peak, a descent, a pass. The line flows onto the parchment as if he'd drawn it 1,000 times. The final point. The quill lifts from the paper. And in that very second, Ethan hears a sound. Not in the room, not outside the window. Somewhere very far away, to the north. A low rumble, as if the earth had cracked and sighed. The walls of the room shudder. The inkwell bounces on the table. Outside the window, the seagulls fall silent all at once. The silence lasts 3 seconds. Then a scream from the owner of the fish shop below rings out. Then shouts from sailors in the street. Then the bell in the harbor tower begins to toll an alarm. Ethan stands with the pen in his hand and stares at the map fragment. The line he has just finished drawing glows, dimly, golden, for a second, 2. Then it fades, and a ringing sound echoes in his head, clear, short, like a blow to a crystal glass, and lines flash before his eyes that no one but him can see. The Peacemaker's Atlas system has been activated, heir to the line confirmed, starting reserve, 100 ink points, regeneration, 10 points per day. The True Line ability is unlocked. The Layer of Truth ability is unlocked. Passive mode. Ethan reads the lines twice. Then he sits back down on the bed. Outside the window, The city hums like a disturbed beehive. Somewhere to the north, 300 miles from here, a mountain range has just split open, revealing a pass that hadn't existed for 300 years. Ethan knows this. He doesn't know how, but he knows for sure. He just drew that pass, and the pass appeared. 4 copper coins in his pocket, 2 months' worth of debt, no guild, no friends, no name. But he has a pen and ink, a scrap of a map, and a system in his head that tells him he's the heir to some lineage. Ethan tucks the scrap into his shirt. He puts on his jacket. He walks out of the room. The stairs creak beneath his feet. Downstairs, the fishmonger is wailing and crossing herself with both hands. Ethan walks by her. She grabs him by the sleeve and says he owes her for 2 months, and that if he doesn't pay by the end of the week, he'll be sleeping on the street. Ethan says he'll pay. She doesn't believe him. He steps out onto the street. Rain lashes his face. Marrowport lies before him, wet and gray. Narrow streets, stone houses with tiled roofs. The harbor below, a forest of masts. The smell of salt and tar and fish and wet wood. The city thrives on fish, trade, and smuggling. The population is about 12,000, the 3rd largest free port on the west coast. Formally, it is not part of the Valcrest Empire, but it pays taxes to it under a trade agreement. The Cartographers Guild is one of the 7 major guilds here, and this morning that guild threw Ethan Reed out onto the street. Ethan is walking across the market square toward the port. The wet stones are slippery under his boots. All around him, people are discussing the rumbling. Someone says it's an earthquake up north. Someone else says it's a landslide in the mountains. No one connects it to the expelled apprentice walking across the square with ink-stained fingers and empty pockets. Ethan heads down to the docks. It smells of seaweed and wet ropes here. Fishing boats rock on the waves. A woman is standing by the 3rd pier. She's in her 50s, thin. Her face is darkened by the wind and salt. The scarf on her head is wet from the rain. She stands there looking out at the sea. Next to her stands a girl of about 24. Her red hair is matted from the rain. Her hands are red from the cold. Both are silent. Both are looking toward where nothing can be seen beyond the gray veil of rain. Ethan steps closer, and the veil of truth activates on its own. It's the first time this has happened, and Ethan isn't expecting it. The world around him flickers red for a second, as if someone had applied a filter to his vision, and he sees. Nailed to a wooden pier post is an old map of the strait, framed and under glass. It's an official map, bearing the guild's seal, and on it are 3 red spots, 3 places where the map lies. One of them is right in the middle of the strait. Where the map shows a clear, deep seabed, there should actually be a sandbar, an old sandy shoal that fishing boats use to navigate around the storm current. Someone erased it from the map 40 years ago. Ethan looks at the woman at the pier. His memory prompts him with a name, Martha Kane, a fisherman's widow. Her son Thomas set out to sea 3 days ago and hasn't returned. 2 Eagles Strait is closed off by a storm. The only safe way home is across the shoal, but the shoal isn't on the map, which means it isn't in the pilot's minds either. So Thomas is searching for a way through the storm. 3 days. The girl next to her is Lyra Kane, Martha's daughter, the navigator on a small fishing sloop. She's gone out to look for her brother twice and returned empty-handed both times because the storm in the strait won't let up. Ethan stands in the rain, staring at the red spot on the map. 40 years ago, someone decided that this shoal wasn't profitable. They crossed it off the atlas, put a stamp on it, and forgot about it. And now, because of that decision, a boy has been adrift in the storm for 3 days, and his mother stands on the pier, silently staring into the gray nothingness. Ethan approaches Martha. She looks at him with empty eyes. He says he needs her to describe the strait as she remembers it, not from the map, from memory. Martha remains silent. Lyra turns to him and asks who he is. Ethan says he's a cartographer. Lyra snorts and says there are plenty of cartographers in this town, and they're about as useful as a goat giving milk. Ethan says he's a different kind of cartographer. Lyra stares at him for a long time, angrily. Then Martha places a hand on her daughter's shoulder and begins to speak, quietly, slowly. She describes the strait, not as it appears on a map, as it is in real life. The current from the west is stronger than the one from the east. On the seabed are rocks that don't appear on any map, and there was a shoal there. That shoal. Her late husband used to walk across it every fall when storms raged. Shallow, sandy, half a mile long. It ran diagonally from the southern cape to an old rock that the fishermen called Granny's Tooth. Ethan listens. Then he pulls a scrap of a map from his breast pocket. He turns it over. The back is blank. He takes a quill and an inkwell out of his pocket. He sits down right on the wet planks of the pier and begins to draw. 2 needles straight, South Cape, Bobkin's Tooth, and between them a thin line, the shoal, depth 2 fathoms, 40 yards wide, half a mile long, running southwest to northeast, deviation angle from the current 17 degrees. Ethan draws and the system in his head calculates. True line activated. Cost 12 ink points. Current reserve 88. The quill touches the parchment one last time. The line is complete. And again, a ringing sound. Quiet. Clear. Favor plus 15. Martha Kane. Favor plus 12. The lost sheet has been recovered. The trail of salt bones. Martha looks at Ethan. Lyra looks at Ethan. Nothing happens. 1 minute. 2. 5. Lyra opens her mouth to say something mean, and at that moment a cry rings out from the sea, a boy's voice. Martha shudders from head to toe. A boat emerges from the gray veil of rain, small, tattered, with a torn sail. At the helm sits a guy in his 20s, his face pale with exhaustion. Thomas Kane. He's steering the boat straight across a shoal that wasn't on the map just 10 minutes ago. The boat glides smoothly and steadily through the shallow water. The keel scrapes against the sand. Thomas throws a rope onto the dock. Martha drops to her knees right into a puddle and hugs her son so tightly that his ribs crack. Lyra stands nearby. Her hands are shaking. Her eyes are wet and not from the rain. She turns to Ethan and utters a single sentence. "What did you just do?" Ethan doesn't answer. He stares at the scrap of map in his hands. The shoal line glows gold and slowly fades. In her mind, the system displays new numbers. 88 ink points in reserve. Regeneration, 10 per day. 1 lost sheet in inventory. Martha Kane's favor, 15. Lyra Kane's favor, 12. The rain continues to fall. Marrowport doesn't know what has changed. Martha cries as she hugs her son. Lyra looks at Ethan as if he were someone she can't quite explain, and Ethan stands on the wet pier with a pen in his hand and realizes one simple thing. His maps work. Not like blueprints, not like diagrams. They really work. He draws, and the world changes. And that means the 4 copper coins in his pocket and 2 months' worth of debt are the least of his problems. Because if anyone in this town finds out what he's capable of, they'll hang him from the guild gates before he has a chance to sharpen his pen. Thomas Kane sits on the pier, wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot broth from a clay bowl. His hands are shaking. 3 days in the storm, without food and almost without water. Martha sits next to him and doesn't let go of his shoulder, as if she's afraid he'll disappear again if she takes her hand away. Lyra stands a little further away, looking at Ethan. The rain is letting up. The sky is still gray, but the wind has died down. Ethan tucks the scrap of a map back into his shirt and is about to leave. Lyra calls out to him. She asks where he's going. Ethan says, home. Lyra asks where his home is. Ethan says it's above the fish shop on Salty Street. Lyra shakes her head and says he's an idiot and that the shopkeeper will throw his things out tomorrow morning because she's already threatened to do so twice. Ethan shrugs. 4 copper coins in his pocket. Not much to go on. Martha looks up and says one word. Dinner. Ethan wants to refuse, but Martha gives him that look you just can't say no to. The kind of look a mother gives when her son has just returned from the dead. Martha Kane's house stands on the edge of the harbor district. It's a small stone house with 2 rooms and a kitchen. The roof leaks in 3 places. The walls are steeped in the smell of salt, fish, and smoke, but inside it's warm and dry. Martha puts a pot on the stove, fish soup, thick, with potatoes and onions and some kind of local herb that smells like thyme. Ethan eats for the first time in 2 days. The hot food burns his throat, and he feels his new host's body gratefully relax. Thomas falls asleep right at the table. Martha covers him with a blanket and leads him into the back room. Lyra sits down across from Ethan and puts her hands on the table. They're the hands of a laborer, calluses from ropes, scrapes on her knuckles, short nails. She looks at Ethan and says she wants to know the truth. Ethan asks, "What truth?" Lyra says the shoal in the strait appeared after he drew it on paper. She's no fool. She saw it. Ethan is silent for 5 seconds. Then he says yes. He drew it, and the shoal appeared. Lyra doesn't scream. She isn't frightened. She doesn't cross herself. She sits in silence and thinks. Then she asks if he can do it again. Ethan says he can, but not everything. Only things that once existed. He doesn't create, he restores. Lyra nods as if it's the most normal explanation in the world. Then she says that if anyone from the guild finds out, he'll be hanged for heresy. Ethan says he's aware of that. Lyra says that Master Oswald Finch is the very man who wiped that sandbar off the map 40 years ago. Back then, he was still a young apprentice and received his first promotion for it. Ethan commits the name to memory. Oswald Finch, Guildmaster, the very same man who this morning threw his maps in his face and called his work hideous. The man who takes bribes from the Empire for accurate maps. The man because of whom Thomas Kane was adrift in the storm for 3 days. Ethan finishes his fish soup. Martha returns from the back room and sits down next to him. She says nothing. Then she pulls a small, rolled-up piece of parchment from her apron pocket and places it on the table. She unrolls it. It's a map, an old one, a very old one. The drawing is faded, but the lines are precise and confident. The map shows the coast of Marrowport, but not as it is now. It's different, with islands that no longer exist, with headlands long since eroded away, and with a shoal in the strait that Ethan has just restored. Ethan looks at the map, and the veil of truth flashes before his eyes. Not a single red spot. This map doesn't lie, not at a single point. He asks where it came from. Martha says it's her husband's map, and before that, his father's, and before that, his grandfather's. Their family has kept this map for 5 generations. Ethan looks more closely. In the lower right corner of the parchment, 2 words are written in small handwriting. The 8th shore. Martha notices his gaze. Her expression changes. She says they won't talk about this today. Ethan doesn't press the issue. He sees something in her eyes that tells him, not now. This woman is keeping a secret heavier than this house. Ethan gets up from the table and thanks her for dinner. Martha says he can stay the night. There's room for a cot in the storage room next to the kitchen. Ethan wants to refuse, but he has only 4 copper coins, and the owner of the fish shop will throw his belongings away tomorrow. He agrees. The storage room is small, 2 steps long and 1.5 steps wide. Shelves lined with jars, bags of grain, the smell of dried herbs. Martha brings a straw mattress and a wool blanket. Ethan lies down and stares at the low ceiling. In his mind, the system displays data. 88 ink points. Regeneration will begin at midnight. 1 lost sheet in his inventory. The Salt Bones Trail. Ethan calls up the description of the sheet. The Trail of Salt Bones. A smuggling route from the era of the 8th continent. 47 miles long. Runs through the salt peaks from the coast to the inner valley. Erased from maps 297 years ago during the Great Survey. Status: ready for restoration. Cost: 35 ink points. Warning: restoring a major feature of the 8th continent awakens a dormant entity bound to this region. Ethan closes the description. The warning makes sense. Every line he draws not only restores a piece of the world, but also awakens something. Something that has been asleep for 300 years. He doesn't yet know exactly what it is, but he knows it won't just go away. In the morning, Ethan wakes up to the smell of porridge. Martha is already up. Thomas is still asleep. Lyra left for the harbor at dawn. Ethan eats his porridge and thinks. 4 copper coins, the rent for the room, expelled from the guild. Officially, he's a nobody. In Marrowport, you can't practice cartography without a guild license. Violation is punishable by a fine of 50 silver coins. He doesn't even have one. But people come to him. Not to the guild, to him. Because his maps work. Ethan steps out onto the street. The rain has stopped for the first time in 3 days. The sun is breaking through the clouds, and the city looks almost alive. He heads to the market. 4 copper coins will be enough for bread and a piece of cheese. At the bakery stall, he overhears a conversation. 2 merchants are discussing yesterday's buzz. One says that merchants from the north sent a messenger, a mountain pass, a new pass, one that never existed before. The mountain range has split open, and now there's an 80-foot wide passage between the 2 peaks. A caravan route through this pass would shorten the journey from the northern ports to the south by 200 miles. The merchants don't believe it. They think the messenger is lying. Ethan doesn't think. Ethan knows. He drew this pass. 80 feet wide, 3,200 meters high, limestone walls, a northeast-facing slope. He drew it because the survey data said the pass had to be there, and the pass appeared. Ethan buys some bread and leaves. A plan is taking shape. A plan takes shape. He needs a workshop, not a license. They won't give him a license. He needs a place where he can work and where people can come. Not like a guild, like a person who solves problems. Martha's storage room will do for now, if Martha doesn't mind. Ethan returns to the Keen's house. Martha is standing in the doorway, talking to a man. The man is short and fat, with a red face and an apron covered in flour. He's the innkeeper from Port Street. His name is Walter Blake. He's waving his arms and saying that his vegetable garden is gone. Not the garden itself, of course, but the boundary of his property. 3 days ago, the city surveying department came and declared that his fence stands 4 feet farther than indicated on the map, and that he needs to tear down the fence and move it closer to the house, or else face a fine of 20 silver coins. Walter yells that the fence has been there for 20 years, and that there's never been a problem. Martha listens in silence. Then she turns around and sees Ethan. She tells Walter that this young man here can help. Walter looks at Ethan skeptically. He asks who he is. Martha says he's a cartographer. Walter snorts and says that cartographers have caused him nothing but trouble. Ethan steps forward and asks if he can see the map the surveying service used to take measurements. Walter pulls a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket. A copy of the survey map, the guild's seal, signed by Master Finch. Ethan takes the sheet, and the layer of truth flashes instantly. A red spot right on the border of Walter's plot. The line has been shifted 4 feet to the south. Not a mistake, an intentional distortion. Ethan asks Walter if he has an old map, anyone, from before the guild took its last survey. Walter thinks for a moment and says he does. His father bought this lot 30 years ago, and the map should be in a trunk. An hour later, Ethan is standing in Walter's garden with 2 maps. The old one and the new one. The difference is obvious. On the old map, the fence is in the right place. On the new one, the line has shifted 4 feet, just enough for Walter to have to pay a fine. The fine goes to the guild's treasury. The guild pockets half for itself. The rest is sent to the Empire as a tax. The scheme is simple. Shift the boundary, impose a fine, pocket the money, repeat. Ethan draws the correct boundary. Not on the scrap of paper, on a new sheet of parchment that Walter brought from home. He draws it precisely, with measurements, with landmarks indicated, with a scale grid. The system doesn't consider this the true line, because a plot's boundary is a human construct, not a geographical feature. But the map is accurate. And with this map, Walter can go to the city magistrate and challenge the land survey office's decision. Walter looks at the map, then at Ethan. Then he takes a silver coin out of his pocket and places it on the table. Ethan wants to refuse. Walter says that work is paid for, and that if Ethan refuses, he'll be offended. Ethan takes the coin. 1 silver coin. That's more than his monthly salary at the guild used to be. The system beeps. Favorability +8. Walter Blake. Ethan hides the coin in his pocket. Now he has 4 copper coins and 1 silver coin. He owes the fishmonger 2 silver coins. He has half of that. By evening, a rumor spreads through the neighborhood. The fired apprentice fixed the map for Blake, the innkeeper, for free. That is, for 1 silver coin. But that's practically free by the guild standards, since they charge 5 silver coins for a land survey. The next morning, an old man with a cane comes to Martha's house. He says his name is Arthur Penn, and that he has a problem with his well. The well ran dry 2 months ago. The Cartographers Guild sent a surveyor, who said the aquifer had shifted and that a new well would have to be dug for 15 silver pieces. Arthur doesn't believe it. The well had been working for 40 years. Aquifers don't shift overnight. Ethan goes to Arthur's well. The layer of truth shows a red spot on the map of aquifers. The water vein line has shifted 20 feet to the west. Another deliberate distortion. Ethan looks at the actual line. The aquifer is in place. The well stands directly above it. The problem isn't with the aquifer. The problem is the pipe, which is clogged with silt at a depth of 30 feet. Ethan draws an accurate map of the underground aquifer and gives it to Arthur. He says the well doesn't need to be dug up, but rather cleaned out. Arthur nods. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out 2 copper coins and half a loaf of bread. He says that's all he has. Ethan takes the bread and refuses the coins. The system beeps. Favorability +5. Arthur Penn. Ethan returns to Martha's house. Lyra is waiting for him on the doorstep. She says 3 more people have come to see him. 1 with a fence problem, 1 with a problem with the road to the dock, and 1 woman who says her husband can't find his way back from the forest because the trail has disappeared. On the 4th day, 7 people come to see Ethan. On the 5th day, 11. By the end of the first week, Martha's storage room has turned into the smallest and most popular workshop in Marrowport. The table is cobbled together from 2 planks resting on trestles. There is only 1 chair. Lyra brewed the ink herself from acorns and iron scale, using a recipe Ethan recalled from his past life. She buys parchment from a junk dealer at the market for a copper coin per sheet. The quality is terrible. The ink bleeds on the cheap parchment, and she has to draw the lines in 2 passes. But the lines are precise. Precise every single time. People come with the same problems over and over. The boundary has shifted. The road on the map doesn't match the road on the ground. A well has run dry because the aquifer has supposedly shifted. A trail into the forest has vanished. A pier has been shortened by 10 feet, and now large boats can't moor there. Every time, the layer of truth shows the same thing. Red spots. Deliberate distortions. The Cartographers Guild, led by Master Finch, has been shifting the lines on the maps for years to secure fines and contracts. Minor shifts, 2 feet here, 5 feet there, 10 degrees at a bend in the road. No one notices because no one checks the Guild's map. The Guild's map is the law. That's what the Empire decided 300 years ago at the Great Survey. Ethan checks. And every time, he finds a lie. By the end of the week, he has 97 points of ink in reserve. Regeneration is working, 10 points per day. Consumption is minimal because boundary maps aren't true lines. The system doesn't spend points on drawings that don't alter geography, only on restoring erased features. The shoal in the strait cost 12 points. The pass on the scrap cost even less because the line was short. Everything else is standard cartography. Pen, ink, and a keen eye. The system merely highlights the lies. Ethan draws the maps himself. On the 7th day, everything changes. The morning starts off normally. Ethan sits at the table in the storage room and draws a map for the tailor's widow. Half of her yard had been taken away from her based on a fake boundary map. It's routine work, measurement, comparison, the correct line, signature. Lyra brought him breakfast, bread and salted fish. She's been bringing him breakfast every morning since the 3rd day and pretends it's a coincidence. Ethan pretends to believe her. There's a knock at the door. Ethan thinks it's his next client. He opens it. Standing on the threshold is Jared Holt, the guild's senior apprentice, the very, very same one who wrote the denunciation that got Ethan fired. Jared isn't alone. Behind him are 2 city guards, low helmets, chainmail, short swords on their belts. Jared smiles, broadly, smugly, and he says that, by decree of the Marrow Port Cartographers Guild, Ethan Reed is accused of illegal cartographic practice without a license. The fine is 50 silver pieces. Failure to pay will result in arrest and forced labor. Ethan stands in the doorway. Martha is behind him. In the storeroom, on the table, the map the tailor's widow drew hasn't dried yet. One of the guards steps forward and says he needs to get through. Ethan doesn't move. Jared says he has no choice, and that the law is the law. Lyra appears from around the corner of the house with a bucket in her hand. She asks what's going on. Jared glances at her and says it's none of her business. Lyra says this is her house, and that no one will come in here without a magistrate's warrant. Jared shows her a piece of paper bearing the guild's seal. Lyra says the guild's seal isn't a magistrate's warrant. Jared blushes. The guards exchange glances. One of them clearly doesn't want to be here. Ethan takes a step forward and says he's ready to go with them. Lyra grabs him by the sleeve and hisses that he's an idiot. Ethan tells her quietly to trust him. Then he turns to Jared and says he'll go, but not to the guild, to the pier, in public, in front of witnesses. Jared frowns and asks why the pier. Ethan says he wants to show him something interesting, and that if Jared refuses, Ethan will simply tell the 20 people already standing on the street watching what's going on. Jared looks around. It's true. Neighbors, merchants, fishermen. The harbor district is small, and news travels faster than seagulls. 20 people are standing there watching. Jared agrees. Pier number 4. Marrow Port's main commercial pier. 120 feet long, 25 feet wide, oak pilings. At this hour, a dozen merchants are unloading goods from 2 ships on the pier. Ethan arrives with Jared and the guards. A crowd of onlookers trails behind them. 30 people, 40. Lyra walks beside Ethan and says nothing. Ethan stops in the middle of the pier. He asks Jared to pull out the official port map. Jared does so. A scroll bearing the guild's seal. Ethan takes the map and spreads it out on a barrel. The layer of truth flares up instantly. 3 red spots. Ethan points at one of them. Right here. According to this map, the length of pier number 4 is 108 feet. Jared nods. Ethan says they're standing on pier number 4 right now. And if the pier is 108 feet long, then they're currently standing beyond the pier, in the air, above the water. Jared turns pale. The merchants start looking around. Ethan continues. The actual length of the pier is 120 feet. That's a difference of 12 feet. 12 feet of pier that actually exist but aren't on the map. 12 feet for which the port pays tax as if it were water surface area, not as a docking structure. The tax rate for water surface is 4 times higher. This means that every merchant who moors at this pier is overpaying for 12 feet of non-existent water. Every year. For 10 years. Ethan turns to the merchants. One of them pulls out a measuring rope. He measures. Exactly 120 feet. Silence. Then a commotion. The merchants start shouting. Not at Ethan. At Jared. Jared backs away. The guards don't intervene. One of them is the captain of the guard, a burly man in his 40s with a red beard and a scar across his left eyebrow. His name is Hannigan. He stands silently, looking at Ethan. Then he pulls his harbor map out of his pocket, the official one, with the seal, and silently hands it to Ethan. Ethan takes it. The layer of truth. 7 red spots. 7 places where the harbor map lies. Ethan points out each one. Pier number 2 is 8 feet shorter. The wharf wall at Warehouse 3 is shifted 6 feet to the east. The depth at Pier 5 is understated by 2 fathoms, which forces large ships to pay for a pilot. And so on. 7 inaccuracies. 7 sources of extra revenue for the guild. Captain Hannigan listens in silence. Then he folds the chart and puts it in his pocket. He turns to Jared and says that the charge of illegal practice is dropped. Jared opens his mouth to speak. Hannigan tells him that he is advised to return to the guild and inform Master Finch that the captain of the Marrow Port Guard would like to see an updated map of the port by the end of the week. A correct map. Jared leaves, quickly, without looking back. Merchants surround Ethan. One of them, a man in an expensive fur-trimmed cloak, introduces himself as Harold Stern, head of the Merchants Guild. He asks how much Ethan charges for a full audit of the harbor map. Ethan names his price, 5 silver pieces. Stern laughs and says that the guild charges 50, 5 silver coins for a job that's worth 50. Stern takes out his purse and counts out 5 silver coins. Then he adds 5 more. He says this is an advance for auditing all the Merchant Guild's trade maps. Ethan takes the money, 10 silver coins. The system beeps. Favorability +8, Captain Hannigan. Favorability +12, Harold Stern. Favorability +5, the Merchants Guild as a whole. Ethan is standing on pier number 4. In his pocket are 14 silver coins and 4 copper coins. He owes the fishmonger 2 silver coins. Lyra stands nearby and smiles for the first time in a week. Not widely, just the corner of her mouth, but she's smiling. Captain Hannigan approaches Ethan and speaks quietly so no one can hear. Tonight, the Old Anchor Tavern. There are people who need to see him. Ethan nods. Hannigan leaves. Lyra asks what he said. Ethan says he's been invited to dinner. Lyra snorts and says the Old Anchor isn't a place for dinner. It's a place where people who want the Empire to get out of Marrowport gather. Ethan asks how she knows. Lyra says everyone knows. It's just that no one says it out loud. Before evening, Ethan manages to pay off his debt to the fishmonger and pick up his belongings. There aren't many of them. A spare shirt, a razor, 3 sheets of blank parchment, a box of charcoal for sketches, and a tool bag that the guild returned to him when he was dismissed. A ruler, a compass, a protractor, old, copper, with play in the hinges, but they still work. That evening, Ethan goes to the Old Anchor, a tavern on the edge of the harbor district. Low ceiling, smoke, the smell of beer and fried fish. Captain Hannigan is sitting at a corner table. Next to him are 2 people. One is a tall, thin man with graying temples and long fingers, Harold Stern, head of the Merchants Guild. The second is a woman, broad-shouldered, hands like a blacksmith's, because she is a blacksmith. Short, dark hair, a leather apron covered in scorch marks. Around her neck is a chain with a small steel square. Rhonda MacArthur, 27 years old, a blacksmith and toolmaker. Ethan sits down at the table. Hannigan orders 4 mugs of dark port wine. Stern says he needs a cartographer, not one from the guild, but his own. Hannigan says he needs someone who can tell a real map from a fake one. Rhonda remains silent and looks at Ethan. Then she pulls a steel nib from her apron pocket, thin, shiny, with a perfectly sharpened tip. She places it on the table in front of Ethan. She says she heard he needed a good nib. Ethan picks up the nib. The weight is just right. The balance is precise. The tip is sharpened to a 30-degree angle, perfect for fine lines. He asks how much it costs. Rhonda says it's free. The system beeps. Favorability +10. Rhonda MacArthur. Ethan thanks her. Rhonda waves it off and says it's a sample. If he likes it, she'll put together a set. A compass, a ruler, and a protractor. All made of steel, not copper. Ethan asks why she needs these. Rhonda remains silent. Stern speaks for her. Rhonda had a brother, a mining engineer. 3 years ago, he mapped an ore vein in the mountains north of the city. The vein was rich, silver, and tin. Rhonda's brother sent the map to the Imperial Mining Bureau. The Bureau sent a reply. The map was incorrect. There was no vein. But 2 months later, an Imperial mine opened right there. Her brother was arrested for making an illegal map and sent to a penal colony. He died a year later. Rhonda stares at the table. Her hands are clenched into fists. Her knuckles are white. Ethan is silent. Then he says that if she brings him a copy of her brother's map, he can check it. Rhonda lifts her head. She looks at him for a long time. Then she nods. Hannigan changes the subject. He says that in 14 days, the legate cartographer from the capital will arrive in Meroport, Cassius Fern, and audit once every 5 years. The legate brings a reference atlas and compares the city to the map. If he finds any discrepancies, the city pays triple the tax. Johanna's son sits at a table in the old anchor, trembling. Not from the cold, though she's soaked to the bone, from fear. Hannigan brings her a blanket. Stern orders hot soup. Rhonda silently pushes her mug of beer closer. Johanna doesn't touch anything. She sits there, clutching her notebook to her chest like a shield. Ethan sits across from her and waits. He doesn't rush her. He doesn't ask questions. He just waits. 3 minutes later, Johanna begins to speak, quietly, quickly, biting her words. She is a former student of the Imperial Academy of Cartography in the capital, Valcrest. 3 years ago, she asked a question in class. One question. Why the angles don't add up on the East Coast. The coastline from Cape Steelwind to Quiet Waves Bay has a total angle of 347 degrees. That's impossible. A closed coastal loop should total 360. 13 degrees are missing. That means there's a missing stretch of coastline approximately 90 miles long between the Cape and the bay. She asked that question. The professor turned pale. The next day, she was summoned to the rector's office. The rector said that the question was a form of heresy and that she should forget what she had seen. Johanna didn't forget. A week later, they came for her. She fled through a dorm window at night and has been in hiding ever since. 3 years, 4 cities. She makes ends meet by washing dishes and sewing. She carries the notebook with her at all times. She has never let it out of her hands. Ethan holds out his hand. Johanna looks at his hand, then at his face. Then she slowly places the notebook on the table. Ethan unfolds the oil-stained cloth. The notebook is thick, 120 pages, filled with small, neat handwriting, drawings, calculations, tables. Ethan opens the first page, and his breath catches. These aren't just a student's notes. They're 3 years of systematic work. Johanna has recalculated the entire eastern coast of Valcrest based on the data she memorized before fleeing. Every cape, every cove, every corner, and every time the result was the same. 13 degrees were missing. 90 miles of coastline were missing. She hadn't just found an error, she had proven that the error was systemic and intentional. Ethan flips through the pages. Projections. She had tried recalculating the coastline using different projections and got the same answer every time. Ethan stops on page 47. Here, Johanna had drawn the coastline as it would look if the missing 90 miles were added. And in this drawing, between the Cape and the bay, a long bend in the coastline appears, stretching eastward, out to sea, in the direction where, according to every map in the world, there is nothing but the open ocean. Ethan looks at the drawing, and the layer of truth flashes gold. Not red, gold. He's never seen anything like this before. The golden glow means it's true. Absolute, geodetic truth. Johanna hadn't made a single mistake in her calculations. Those 90 miles of coastline exist. They're just not on the map. Ethan closes the notebook. He looks at Johanna. She's sitting across from him, waiting. Her hands are clasped so tightly her knuckles have turned white. She's waiting to hear what he'll say. For 3 years she's carried this notebook, and every person she's shown it to has said one of two things. Either you're wrong, or you're crazy. Ethan says she isn't wrong. He says her calculations are correct. He says that right here on page 23, a correction for curvature is needed because at such distances, a flat projection introduces an error of 1.5 degrees. But even with that correction, the result is the same. 11.5 degrees. 80 miles, at least. Johanna looks at him. Then she lowers her head onto the table. Her shoulders are shaking. She's crying. Not out of grief, out of relief. For 3 years, she thought she was going crazy. For 3 years, she'd wake up at night and recalculate the angles in her head.
For 3 years, she'd hide her notebook and hide herself. And every day, she'd ask herself, what if I really was wrong?
Ethan sits and waits for her to finish crying. Rhonda silently pushes her mug of beer closer to her. Hannigan stares at the ceiling. Stern wipes his glasses. The system beeps. Favorability +12. Johanna Sun. Threshold 20 reached. Atlas Lottery. Lost map received. Salt Bones, north. Ethan feels a new map unfolding in his mind. Salt Bones Trail, northern sector. Coordinates, elevations, landmarks, and a name that makes him shudder. The Salt Peaks of the 8th Continent. A lost smuggling route, erased 297 years ago. It runs through a mountain range from the coast to an inland valley beyond the Imperial Customs Post. Ethan sets this information aside. There are more important things right now. Johanna looks up. Her eyes are red. Her nose is red. She wipes her face with her sleeve and says, "I'm sorry." Ethan says there's no need to apologize. Then he asks where she lives. Johanna remains silent. That means nowhere. Ethan turns to Martha, whom he already knows is standing behind him because Martha always shows up when someone has nowhere to go. Martha nods. One storage room is already taken by Ethan, but there's an attic in the house. Small, but dry. They can find a mattress. Johanna says she can't, that she doesn't want to be a burden. Martha says the attic is empty and that dinner is ready. Johanna opens her mouth to refuse. Then she closes it. Then she says, "Thank you," in such a tiny voice that it's barely audible. Rhonda stands up and says she'll walk him out. It's on her way anyway. Stern takes his leave and leaves. Hannigan finishes his beer and tells Ethan he'll be at the market tomorrow at 10. He'll be waiting. Ethan nods. Hannigan leaves. Ethan remains alone at the table. He looks at Johanna's notebook, which she'd left on the table. No, she didn't forget it. She left it there, on purpose. For the first time in 3 years, she'd let it slip from her hands. Ethan picks up the notebook and opens the last page. There's a drawing there, a coastline with a missing piece, and from that piece, a dotted line stretches eastward, into the ocean, to a point that Johanna had circled and labeled with a single word, a question. She doesn't know what's there. She only knows that there's something there. Ethan knows. There's the 8th continent, the very one that was erased from the maps 300 years ago, and the very one that's now trying to return. Ethan closes the notebook and walks out of the tavern. Night, stars, a salty breeze from the sea. He walks toward Martha's house and thinks, 13 days until the audit. The legate is coming here to check the city maps. But in reality, the legate is coming here to make sure no one has found what was erased. 30% of the standard atlas is a lie. 90 miles of coastline don't exist on paper. A mountain pass has appeared out of nowhere. The shoal in the strait has returned. The world is cracking at the seams, and the map can't hold it together. Ethan enters the house. It's quiet. Martha is asleep. Thomas is asleep. Lyra is asleep in the room by the window. Ethan can hear her breathing through the thin wall. It's quiet in the attic. Johanna has either fallen asleep or is sitting in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Ethan goes into the storage room and sits down at the table. For the next 5 days, Ethan works 18 hours a day. Clients in the morning. In the afternoon, the map of Merrow Port map. In the evening, calculations with Johanna. At night, 4 hours of sleep on a straw mattress in the storage room. Johanna turns out to be the perfect partner for cartographic work. She can't spot lies on maps like Ethan can, but she can calculate, quickly, accurately, without mistakes. Angles, distances, elevations, projections. Ethan tells her she needs to recalculate the scale from a flat projection to a conical one. Johanna asks what a conical projection is. Ethan explains it using an orange. He takes an orange from Martha's basket. He says that a flat projection is like cutting open the peel and flattening it on a table. The edges stretch out, the middle shrinks. A conical projection is like wrapping the orange in a paper cone and projecting the image onto the cone. There's less distortion at mid-latitudes. Johanna listens, her eyes wide open. Then she picks up a pen and, in 2 hours, recalculates her entire coastline table using the conic projection. Not a single mistake. The result? 11.3 degrees. 78 miles of coastline. Even more than Ethan had thought. He looks at Johanna and tells her she's a genius. Johanna blushes to her ears and mumbles that she's not a genius, just good at math. Ethan says it's the same thing. Johanna blushes even more. Every day, people come to Martha's house. Word of the cartographer, who charges 5 silver coins instead of 50, has spread throughout the port. Ethan doesn't charge 5. He takes whatever people can give. Baker William Thorne paid with pies. The widow Eliza Price paid with 2 skeins of wool. Old Arthur Penn brought a basket of apples from his garden. Only merchants and shopkeepers pay with money. Ethan keeps track. In 5 days, 34 people passed through his storeroom. 34 maps were checked. 28 of them contained deliberate distortions. 28 out of 34. 82% of the cards in Meroport are lying. The system keeps its own tally. 112 ink points in reserve. Regeneration is stable. Favor is growing slowly, but surely. Every person Ethan has helped adds a few points. Not many, but steadily. There are still 2 missing sheets, the Trail of the Salt Bones and the Salt Bones North. Ethan isn't activating them. It's not time yet. Every restored line of the 8th continent awakens a creature. And he has no time for creatures right now. He needs to survive until the audit. On the 6th day, Rhonda arrives. She brings a leather bundle and unwraps it on the table. Inside is a set of tools, a steel compass, an 18-inch ruler with an engraved scale, a 180-degree protractor, and a second steel nib, thinner than the first, for fine details. Ethan picks up the compass. He spreads the legs. The movement is smooth, no play, accurate to 1/1000th of an inch. It's the best tool he's ever held in either of his 2 lives. He asks how much it costs. Rhonda says this is free, too. Ethan says he can't accept such a gift. Rhonda sits down on a stool and remains silent. Then she says it's not a gift, it's a request. Ethan waits. Rhonda pulls a folded sheet of paper from the inside pocket of her apron. She unfolds it. A map. A copy of her brother's map. An ore vein in the mountains north of the city, running northwest to southeast. Depth of occurrence, 40 to 120 feet. Vein width, 3 to 8 feet. Silver and tin. The coordinates are precise. The measurements are detailed. Rhonda's brother knew his stuff. Ethan picks up the map, and the layer of truth flashes to life. Not a single red spot. Rhonda's brother's map doesn't lie. The vein exists, exactly where he drew it. Ethan picks up the second map, the official map from the Imperial Mining Bureau, the very one that supposedly shows no vein. The layer of truth. A red spot the size of a fist. On the Imperial map, the vein has been shifted 200 feet to the east and marked as barren rock, a deliberate distortion. Someone at the Mining Bureau got hold of Rhonda's brother's map, saw that the vein was rich, shifted its location on his own map, declared her brother's map a forgery, arrested him, and opened a mine in the right spot, stole the vein, stole the job, stole a life. Ethan lays both maps side by side, shows them to Rhonda. Here's your brother's map, the correct one. Here's the Empire's map, the fake one. The vein was here. See the difference? Rhonda stares at the maps for a long time, in silence. Then she stands up. She walks out of the storeroom. Ethan hears something crash against the wall. Then silence. Then Rhonda returns. Her eyes are dry, red. The knuckles on her right hand are broken. There's a new dent in the wall in the hallway. She sits back down on the stool and says one word, "Thank you." The system beeps. Favorability +20. Rhonda MacArthur, threshold 20 reached. Rhonda says she needs to tell you something. She's not just a blacksmith. She's a member of the Brotherhood of the Ruler, a secret union of artisans that has been fighting the imperial standard for 20 years. Blacksmiths, masons, carpenters, all those who work with their hands and see every day that the Empire's maps don't match reality. The Brotherhood numbers about 40 people in Marrowport and another 300 along the coast. They meet in secret, they exchange measurements, they keep the correct blueprints, and they wait. Rhonda says she was sent to keep an eye on Ethan. The Brotherhood had heard of a cartographer who was expelled from the guild for making maps that were too accurate. Rhonda was supposed to approach him, to check him out, to find out if he was the real deal or a plant. The steel nib was the test. If Ethan had refused or failed to appreciate its quality, Rhonda would have left and reported that he wasn't the one they were looking for. Ethan appreciated it. The sharpening angle was 30 degrees. Balance, weight, he's a cartographer through and through. Rhonda realized this the very first second. Ethan asks what the Brotherhood wants from him. Rhonda says the Brotherhood needs a route through the Salt Peaks, a mountain pass that bypasses the Imperial Customs post at the Three Guardians Pass. Customs stifles smuggling and legal trade alike. The duty is 40% on all goods. The Brotherhood knows there used to be another path through the mountains, an old one, before the demarcation. But it was erased from the maps and forgotten. Ethan remains silent because he knows this path, the Trail of the Salt Bones, the Lost Leaf. 47 miles through the Salt Peaks, erased 297 years ago. The cost of restoration is 35 ink points, and a warning, the awakening of a creature. Ethan tells Rhonda that the path exists, that he can restore it, but that it isn't free, not with money. Consequences. Every line he restores from the old world awakens something. He doesn't know exactly what, but something will awaken. Rhonda asks how dangerous it is. Ethan says he doesn't know, honestly. Rhonda thinks for a moment. Then she says the Brotherhood needs this path, that without it, in a year, half the coastal artisans will go bankrupt. That customs takes 40%, and of that 40%, only 5 goes to the treasury, while the remaining 35 goes into the outpost commander's pocket. That people are starving, that the children of thee haven't eaten meat in 3 months. Ethan nods. He says he needs 2 days to prepare. Rhonda stands up. She shakes his hand, firmly, like a man, and she leaves. That evening, Ethan sits in the storeroom, staring at 2 lost maps, the Saltbones Trail and Saltbones North. Together, they form a complete route through the mountains, 47 miles. If he activates both, he'll gain passage through the Salt Peaks. Caravans will be able to bypass customs. Trade will pick up. Artisans will stop going broke. But something will awaken, something that has been asleep for 297 years. Lyra walks into the pantry without knocking. She never knocks. She sets a bowl of soup and a piece of bread in front of him. Then she notices the sheets of paper on the table. She asks what they are. Ethan explains, briefly, the trail, mountains, a creature. Lyra listens. Then she says her mother knows about the Salt Peaks, that the Kane family has a story about how her great-grandfather used to lead merchant ships to the foot of the Salt Peaks, and that there were caves there, big ones, salt caves, with crystals on the walls 3 times a person's height, and that something lived in those caves, not people, something ancient, something made of salt. Ethan asks, what exactly? Lyra shrugs and says she doesn't know. Her mother used to tell her this as a bedtime story, when Lyra was 6. Ethan gets up and goes over to Martha. Martha is sitting in the kitchen, mending a fishing net. Ethan sits down next to her and asks about the Salt Peaks. Martha doesn't look up from the net. She's silent for 30 seconds. Then she says that a walker lives there, a big one, made of salt. He's sleeping. He's been sleeping for 300 years. If the trail returns, he'll wake up, and he'll go looking for his burrow. Ethan asks if he's dangerous. Martha says the walker isn't evil. He's just old and lost. His burrow was wiped out along with the trail. He went to sleep because there was nowhere else to go. If the trail returns, he'll wake up and follow it. And if he doesn't find his burrow, he'll keep going toward the city, not because he wants to destroy it, but because he's looking for a home. Ethan asks if it's possible to bring the burrow back. Martha looks up for the first time. She looks at him and says that the burrow was at the end of the trail, right at the very end, beyond the last pass. If he draws the trail completely, from start to finish, the burrow will return along with it. If he draws only half of it, the walker will wake up but won't find the burrow. Ethan thanks Martha and returns to the storeroom. 2 missing pages, the trail and the salt bones to the north. Together, they provide the complete route, the beginning and the end, the trail and the burrow. If he activates both at the same time, the wanderer will wake up and immediately find his way home. Cost: 35 points for the trail, 35 points for the salt bones. Total: 70 points. He has 112. He'll have 42 left. Regeneration will restore 10 points per day. In 4 days, he'll be at 82. In 8 days, before the audit, he'll be at 122. That's enough. But that means he'll be operating at minimum capacity for the next 4 days. No true lines, only ordinary maps. Just a quill, ink, and a keen eye. Ethan dips Rhonda's steel quill into the ink. He lays out the 2 lost sheets of paper side by side, and he begins to draw. The trail of salt bones, from the coast to the mountains, through the White Salt Gorge, past 3 salt lakes, up the winding road to the Bone Ridge Pass, down through the cave city, and on into the inner valley, where a burrow stands at the foot of the last peak, large, warm, salty. A home for a creature that has been sleeping for 297 years. The line is drawn, is inscribed on parchment. The system calculates. 35 points, 35 points, 72 hours. Ethan counts every hour in his head. The first day after activation passes quietly. Clients arrive, maps are drawn. Johanna sits in the attic and reckons the coastal charts in conic projection. Lyra heads out to sea at dawn and returns by lunchtime with her catch and news. Merchants at the market say they heard a rumbling in the mountains north of the city. Not like on the first day, quieter, more rhythmic, as if someone were pounding a hammer against stone deep underground. Ethan knows what it is. The walker is waking up. Slowly, layer by layer, it sheds the crust of salt that has covered it for 297 years. First the fingers, then the hands, then the shoulders, then the head. Ethan imagines this and feels uneasy. 40 feet, 12 metric tons. A creature made of crystalline salt searching for its home. On the second day, the rumbling can be heard in the harbor. Martha stands in the doorway and listens. Her face is calm. She knew this would happen. She had warned them. Lyra approaches Ethan and asks him point blank, "This is because of you." Ethan says yes. Leah is silent. Then she asks what he plans to do. Ethan says the walker is following a trail. If the trail is drawn correctly from start to finish, the walker will reach its burrow and go to sleep. If not, it will keep going, toward the city. Leah asks if he's sure the trail is drawn correctly. Ethan says he's 94% sure. Leah says that 6% is too much when it comes to 40 feet of salt leading toward the city. Ethan agrees. He says he needs to go out to meet the walker and make sure the trail leads where it's supposed to. Lyra says she's going with him. Ethan says there's no need. Lyra says she isn't asking. On the morning of the 3rd day, they leave Marrowport, Ethan and Lyra. Rhonda wanted to go with them, but Ethan asked her to stay. If anything goes wrong, the city will need someone who can organize the evacuation of the port district. Rhonda agreed reluctantly. Johanna stayed at Martha's house with her notebook and assignment to recalculate the scale grid of the Marrowport map for revision. The journey to the Salt Peaks takes 6 hours on foot, 14 miles northeast along the road through the hills. Then the trail heads into the mountains. Lyra walks quickly. Her steps are steady. She used to hike in these mountains with her father when she was little. They'd gather mountain herbs for her mother. Lyra talks about this between steps. Not much, just bits and pieces. Her father was tall. He had big hands. He laughed loudly. He drowned 7 years ago in a storm. His body was never found. Lyra falls silent after that and remains quiet for the next 2 hours. Ethan doesn't disturb her. He walks beside her, visualizing the map in his mind. The Salt Bones Trail unfolds before him like a holographic projection. every turn, every ascent, every descent. The system displays the route in real time. They're at the 8-mile mark, 6 more to the entrance of the White Salt Gorge. The rumbling grows louder with every mile. At the 12-mile mark, Ethan feels a vibration in the ground beneath his feet. Rhythmic, heavy footsteps. The walker is coming. Lyra stops. She listens. She says it sounds like a heartbeat if you press your ear to the ground, only louder and slower. They enter the White Salt Gorge at the 14-mile mark. The canyon walls are white. Pure rock salt protrudes from the bedrock in layers as thick as a hand. In the sun, it glitters like broken glass. The air is dry and bitter. The trail beneath their feet is distinct. Not an old, overgrown trail, a new one, fresh, as if someone had walked it yesterday, because someone had. Ethan drew this trail 2 days ago, and the trail appeared, along with all the rocks and potholes and turns that were here 297 years ago. The layer of truth reveals a golden glow along the entire length of the trail. Not a single red spot. Everything is real. Everything is right. At the bend in the gorge, Lyra grabs Ethan's hand. Ahead, on the trail, footprints, huge ones. Each print is 4 feet long and 6 inches deep. The edges of the footprints are covered with salt crystals. The traveler passed this way recently, maybe an hour ago, maybe less. Ethan and Lyra follow the tracks. The trail climbs upward, a switchback, 3 turns, 5, 7. The air is getting thinner. The salt crystals on the canyon walls are growing. At an elevation of 2,800 feet, the crystals are as big as a human head. At 3,200, they're taller than Ethan, transparent, pinkish. Inside some of them, air bubbles can be seen, frozen 300 years ago. At an altitude of 3,600 feet, Ethan sees it. The walker is standing on the Bone Ridge Pass, with its back to them. Lyra stops. Ethan stops. The walker stands motionless, 40 feet. Ethan's calculations were correct. A creature made of crystalline salt. Its body is like a column. 4 legs like the trunks of old oak trees. 2 arms hang down along its body to its knees. There is no head as such. The upper part of the body ends in a crest of long salt crystals, radiating outward like a crown. White, translucent. Inside the body, dark veins of some mineral inclusions are visible inside the body. The walker stands still and does not move. Ethan takes a step forward. Lyra grabs him by the sleeve. He turns around and tells her to stay here. Lyra says he's an idiot. Ethan says he knows, and he walks forward. The walker shows no reaction. Ethan moves closer, 50 feet, 30, 20. At a distance of 15 feet, he feels the cold. The walker radiates cold like a block of ice. The air around it is dry and frosty. There's frost on the rocks beneath his feet. Ethan stops and pulls a parchment from his bag, a fresh sheet, Rhonda's steel quill, ink. He sits down right on the rocks 15 feet from the creature that weighs 12 metric tons and begins to draw. Not a trail, a burrow. He had already drawn a burrow in Martha's storage room 2 days ago, but that was a map, a line on paper. Now he's drawing something else. He's drawing a guide, a simple sketch. Point A. The walker is standing here. A line, a trail winding down through the cave city to the end of the route. Point B, the burrow. Distance, 19 miles. Travel time for a creature with a stride length of 12 feet and a speed of 2 miles per hour is approximately 9 hours. Ethan draws. The system doesn't cost any points because this isn't a true line. It's just a map. But the map is accurate, absolutely accurate, with every turn, every descent, and every elevation marker. Ethan finishes drawing. He stands up. He walks 10 feet toward the walker. He places the parchment on the rock in front of it and steps back. The walker doesn't move. 1 second. 5. 10. Ethan starts to think it won't work, that a creature made of salt can't read a map, that he's an idiot, just like Lyra said. At the 15-second mark, the walker bends forward, slowly, with a creak. The crystals on its crest rub against each other, making a sound as if someone were running a fingernail across glass. One of its hands drops toward the ground. It touches the parchment. Its fingers are as thick as logs, 3 on each hand. The walker lifts the parchment. He brings it up to where his face should be. The crystals on the crest glow faintly, a pinkish glow, warm. The walker stands with the parchment for 30 seconds. Then he lowers it to the ground, carefully. He turns around and begins to walk down the winding path, along the trail, toward his burrow. His steps are heavy. The ground trembles. But he's heading in the right direction, away from the city, toward a home that hasn't existed for 297 years. The return trip takes 5 hours. Lyra walks in silence, but it's a different kind of silence. Not cold, calm. As they approach the city, she says that the Brotherhood of the Ruler's caravan can set out tomorrow morning. The trail is clear. The walker listened. Ethan nods. His legs ache. 28 miles in a single day is a lot for a body that has spent the last 3 years sitting at a desk drawing maps. They enter Merroport at sunset. Rhonda is standing at the city gates. Her arms are crossed over her chest. Her face is tense. She sees them and exhales. She says she was just about to follow them. Ethan says everything is fine. The walker has gone back to his burrow. Rhonda asks how he knows the walker won't return. Ethan says the burrow is still there. He restored it along with the trail. The walker has no reason to come back. He's home. Rhonda nods. Then she says the caravan will leave the day after tomorrow morning. 12 wagons. Cloth, tools, iron, everything the artisans couldn't get through Imperial Customs for the past 6 months. Ethan says okay and heads home. Martha's house. Warmth, soup, bread. Thomas has already recovered and is helping his mother in the shop. He looks at Ethan with the kind of expression people have when they don't know how to say thank you for their lives, so he just nods. Ethan nods back. That's enough. Johanna comes down from the attic with eyes ablaze. She's recalculated the scale grid 4 times. The result is consistent. The Merroport map Ethan is drawing is 4.7% more accurate than the reference atlas. That's not just better. It's an order of magnitude better. The standard atlas uses a flat rectangular projection that results in a 3% error at the latitude of Merroport. Ethan's map uses a conic projection that Johanna recalculated. The margin of error is 0.3%. Johanna says this with such enthusiasm that she forgets to breathe between sentences. Ethan tells her she did a great job. Johanna stammers and mumbles that it wasn't her, but the projection. Ethan says that she was the one who recalculated the projection. Johanna blushes and runs off to the attic. Lyra watches this scene from the corner of the kitchen and shakes her head. She says quietly that Ethan draws people to him like a magnet draws iron filings. Marta replies from the kitchen that it's not a magnet. It's a person who does the right things. People go to the one who does the right things. They always have. In the evening, Ethan sits in the storage room working on a map of the city. 7 days until the audit. The map is 60% complete. He needs to finish the harbor area and the western district. At least 2 days' work. A knock at the door. Ethan opens it. Standing on the threshold is a girl he's never seen before. She's young, about 19. Her light hair is pulled back into a high updo. Her dress is expensive. Green velvet with silver embroidery. Around her neck is a thin chain with a small emerald. Standing next to her is a servant in livery with a coat of arms on his chest, a shield with 2 crossed feathers. The House of Davenport, one of the old aristocratic families of Merroport. The girl smiles, broadly, openly, and introduces herself. Aya Davenport. She says she's heard about the cartographer who turned the pier upside down and that she needs his help. Ethan invites her into the storeroom. The storeroom is 2.5 paces wide. A table, 1 chair, shelves lined with jars. Aya sits down on the chair as if it were a throne, back straight, hands on her knees. The servant remains outside the door. Aya says that the Davenport family has a problem. 3 years ago, her father, Lord Henry Davenport, sold the family estate south of the imperial city, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't pay the land tax. The tax was calculated based on the estate's area. The estate's area was determined by the guild's map. According to the guild's map, the estate covered 340 acres. The tax on 340 acres amounted to 120 gold pieces a year. Lord Davenport couldn't pay 120 gold pieces. No one in Marrowport could pay 120 gold pieces for land that generated income from 200 acres of vineyards. 200 acres of vineyards cannot cover the tax on 340 acres. The math is simple. Lord Davenport sold the estate to the imperial governor for a third of the price and moved into a townhouse. Aya says all this calmly and evenly, but her hands, clenched on her knees, are so tight that her knuckles have turned white. Ethan asks if she has seen the map used to calculate the tax. Aya pulls a folded document from her sleeve, a copy of the Davenport Estate's survey map, the guild's seal, signed by Master Finch. Ethan takes the document, and the veil of truth flares up like a fire. A red stain covers almost the entire drawing. The estate's boundary on the map has been inflated. The northern line has been shifted 400 feet to the north. The eastern boundary is shifted 300 feet to the east. The estate's actual area is not 340 acres, it's 204 acres. The difference is 136 acres. 136 acres that exist only on paper. The tax on 204 acres would amount to 72 gold pieces. Lord Davenport could have paid that. It would have been a struggle, but he could have. He was forced to sell the estate because the area on the map had been inflated by 40%. Ethan places the map on the table. He looks at Aya and says that the estate's area is not 340 acres, but 204. That the boundary on the map is fake, and that her father sold the house not because he couldn't pay the tax, but because he was charged tax on land that doesn't exist. Aya is silent. Then she says she knew, that she'd suspected this for 2 years, but she couldn't prove it, because the only official map is the guild's map, and the guild is subordinate to the empire. And the empire bought the estate for a third of its price, and now grows grapes there for the imperial court. Ethan says he can draw the correct map, with the real boundaries, 204 acres. If Aya gives him access to the land for surveying, Aya asks how much it will cost. Ethan says 5 silver coins. Aya takes a gold coin out of her purse and places it on the table. She says she doesn't want any change. Ethan looks at the gold coin. 1 gold coin is equal to 20 silver coins. 4 months' salary for a guild apprentice. Ethan takes the coin and says he'll start the measurements tomorrow. Aya stands up. She smooths out her dress. Then she leans toward him and says quietly that there's a reception in 3 days at their townhouse. Lord Davenport is hosting merchants and guild representatives. Aya would like Ethan to come, officially unofficially, as someone who can speak the truth to the faces of those accustomed to hearing only lies. Ethan says he doesn't have the proper attire for the reception. Aya smiles and says she'll take care of that. The system beeps. Aya Davenport's favor. Starting value, 20. The 20 threshold has already been met. Aya leaves. A servant closes the door behind her. Ethan sits in the storeroom, staring at a gold coin, then at a map of the estate marked with red spots, then out the window, where it's already getting dark. Lyra peeks into the storeroom. She asks who that was. Ethan says it was Aya Davenport. Lyra snorts. She says the Davenport family is old aristocracy and that it's dangerous to get involved with them. Ethan says her map was forged, just like all the others. Lyra says she knows, that the whole city knows, but no one gets involved because the Davenport family lost to the Empire, and getting involved in someone else's war is a bad idea. Ethan says this isn't a war, it's arithmetic. 204 acres does not equal 340. Lyra snorts and says that in this world, arithmetic is war. For the next 3 days, Ethan divides his time between the city map and surveying the Davenport estate. He conducts the survey with Johanna. He takes Rhonda's compass, a ruler, a compass that Rhonda delivered on the 2nd day, steel, precise, with a magnetic needle on an agate base. Johanna takes notes. Every corner, every distance, every elevation. They walk around the estate on an agate base. Johanna takes notes. Every angle, every distance, every elevation. They survey the estate in 2 days. 204 acres, not 340. Ethan draws a map, an accurate one, with a scale grid, with elevations. It indicates soil types, vineyard boundaries, springs, and drainage ditches. The map is beautiful. Ethan catches himself thinking that for the first time in both his lives, he's drawing a map he wouldn't be ashamed to hang on the wall. In the evening, before the reception, a messenger from Aya arrives at Martha's house. He brings a bundle. Inside are clothes, a dark blue doublet, a white shirt, black trousers, boots. Everything fits. Ethan changes in the storage room. He comes out. Martha looks at him and nods approvingly. Lyra looks at him and turns away toward the window. Johanna looks at him and says he looks like a real master. Ethan says that he is a real master, just without a license. Rhonda follows him in at 8 o'clock in the evening. She's changed her clothes too. Instead of a leather apron, she's wearing a clean shirt and a vest. Her hair is styled. Around her neck is the same steel square. She says the Brotherhood asked her to go with him, just in case. Ethan doesn't ask what the case might be.
The Davenport house stands on Upper Street.
It's made of stone, 3 stories, wide windows with stained glass panes. In the courtyard is a fountain that hasn't worked for 2 years. Inside, it's warm and bright. Candles in silver candelabras, carpets, paintings on the walls. The reception is modest by aristocratic standards, but luxurious by Ethan's standards. 20 guests, merchants, guild representatives, 2 captains of merchant ships, the wife of an imperial customs officer. Lord Henry Davenport greets Ethan at the entrance to the hall. Tall, thin, graying temples, tired eyes. His handshake is polite but cold. He is not pleased to see the cartographer in his home. It was Aya's idea, and he agreed because he had long since stopped arguing with his daughter. Aya appears at his side. She is wearing a white dress with gold embroidery. Her hair is down. She takes Ethan by the hand and leads him through the hall, introducing him to each guest. Cartographer Ethan Reed, the very one, the one on the pier. The guests watch with curiosity, some with suspicion. Ethan remains calm. He smiles sparingly. He speaks briefly. When a merchant asks his opinion on the price of parchment, Ethan gives an exact figure per square foot, and the merchant raises his eyebrows in surprise. An hour later, Aya brings him to her father. She says that Ethan has finished surveying the estate and that she'd like him to show the results. Lord Davenport frowns. Ethan takes a rolled-up map out of his bag. He unfolds it on the table. Next to it, he places a copy of the guild's survey map. He points out the difference. 204 acres versus 340, a false boundary. Cassius Verne stands in the doorway and surveys the room like a surgeon examining a patient before an operation, calmly, methodically, without emotion. His gaze glides over the guests' faces, along the walls, across the table where Ethan's maps lie. He takes 3 steps forward, and the soldiers part behind him. Lord Davenport rises and greets him with a bow, polite but not obsequious. The House of Davenport is of old blood. They bow but do not grovel. Verne nods in response and says he apologizes for the unplanned visit, that the journey from the capital turned out to be shorter than expected, that he arrived in Merroport 2 hours ago, and, as his first order of business, paid a visit to the city's oldest house. A lie. Ethan sees right through it, without any need for the veil of truth. Verne arrived early on purpose, to catch the town off guard, to prevent them from preparing. And the first thing he did was go not to the guild or the magistrate's office, but to a reception at the Davenports, because someone had already informed him that Ethan would be here. Verne walks over to the table. He looks at the maps. He picks up the guild's survey map, then Ethan's map. He places them side by side. He studies them in silence for 30 seconds. Then he looks up at Ethan. He asks who took the measurements. Ethan says he did. Verne asks what tools were used. Ethan lists them. A steel compass, a compass with an agate base, and a 66-foot measuring chain. Verne asks what projection was used. Ethan says a conic equidistant projection. Verne raises an eyebrow. For the first time all evening, his face shows something other than cold indifference. He says that the imperial standard prescribes a flat, rectangular projection, and that the conic projection has not been approved by the Academy.
Ethan says that a flat, rectangular projection at the latitude of Merroport yields an error of 3%, while the conic projection yields 0.3%. Vern is silent. He knows Ethan is right. Any cartographer with an imperial education knows that a flat projection is unsuitable for mid-latitudes. But a standard is a standard. The flat projection was approved by the Academy 200 years ago, and no one intends to change it. Because a 3% margin of error isn't a mistake, it's a tool. 3% allows you to shift boundaries without anyone noticing. 3% is 136 acres of the Davenport estate. 3% is 12 feet of pier number 4. 3% is thousands of gold coins a year, flowing from the townspeople's pockets into the Empire's treasury through falsified maps. Vern puts the maps back on the table and says that the official audit will begin the day after tomorrow at the Cathedral of the Seven Guilds, that all maps of the city must be submitted for inspection, and that any discrepancy with the standard atlas will be considered potential heresy. He utters the word heresy evenly and calmly, just as one might say rain or dinner. Then he nods to Lord Davenport and leaves. The soldiers follow him out. The hall falls silent. Ethan stands with the maps in his hands and counts. The day after tomorrow, 2 days. The map of Merroport is 80% complete. He needs to finish the western quarter, 1 day's work, then proofreading, then a final scale check. 2 days will be enough. Barely. Ethan doesn't sleep at night. He sits in the storeroom and draws. The western quarter, street by street, house by house, every turn, every alley. Rhonda's steel nib glides across the parchment without stopping. Johanna sits on the floor nearby and checks the scale of each section. She isn't sleeping either. At dawn, Lyra brings them coffee. Not real coffee. A bitter herbal brew that they call black water in Merroport, but it's hot and strong. Ethan drinks and draws. By noon, the map is ready. Ethan sets his pen and looks at the result. Merroport, a complete map. Every street, every house, every pier, every dock, every well, every fence. In a conic equidistant projection, margin of error, 0.3%. Beautiful, accurate, authentic. The first correct map of this city in 30 years. Johanna looks at the map and says, quietly, that it's the best thing she's ever seen. Ethan says that half of this map is her work. Johanna shakes her head and says she just did the calculations. Ethan says that calculating is half of cartography. The other half is drawing. He hands her a pen. He says that the final copy will bear 2 names, his and hers. Johanna takes the pen and looks at it as if it were something sacred. Then she says in a trembling voice that she can't, that she's a runaway student, that her name is on the wanted list, that if Leggett sees her name on the map, he'll recognize who she is. Ethan pauses. He hadn't thought of that. Johanna is a runaway. The Academy has been searching for her for 3 years. If Vern sees Johanna Sun's name on the map submitted for review, he might connect it to the runaway student who asked the wrong question. And then, Johanna is finished. Ethan takes the pen back. He says her name won't be there, for now, but the work is still hers. And when the time comes, he'll make sure everyone knows who calculated the large-scale grid. Johanna nods. Her eyes are wet. Then she goes up to the attic. Ethan hears her crying, quietly, trying not to make a sound. The day before the audit, Ethan spends it preparing a final check of the scales, verifying every number, every angle, every line. Rhonda arrives at noon and brings a tube, steel, with a screw-on lid, for the map. She says she made it overnight. Ethan folds up the map and puts it in the tube. The tube is heavy, cold, sturdy. Lyra arrives in the evening. She brings news. Leggett Vern spent the whole day at the Cartographers Guild with Master Finch. The doors were locked. Guards stood at the entrance. No one was allowed in. Jared Holt ran around town collecting some papers. No one knows what those papers are. Lyra says it's a bad sign. Ethan agrees. Vern is getting ready. The question is, for what?
At night, Ethan lies on his mattress and stares at the ceiling. 82 ink points in reserve. Regeneration is stable. The map is ready. Allies are in position. Hannigan and the guards. Stern and the merchants. Rhonda and the Brotherhood. Aya and House Davenport. Lyra and Martha. Johanna and her calculations. Standing against him is the legate cartographer of the Valcrest Empire, a man who came not to verify the maps, but to erase what should not exist. Ethan pulls a scrap of a map from his bosom, the very one, the one that started it all. The pass, now drawn in, a line that no longer glows, just old parchment with brown and black ink. Ethan flips the scrap over. The reverse side is blank, or is it? Ethan holds the parchment up to the candle. He tilts it at an angle. The morning of the inspection. Merroport wakes up early. The shops are closed. The market is empty. The whole city is heading to the Cathedral of the Seven Guilds. The cathedral isn't a church. It's a long stone building in the city center where the 7 guilds of Merroport gather once a quarter to make joint decisions. The hall seats 400 people. Stone walls. Tall windows. A wooden floor polished by thousands of feet over 100 years. Today, there's nowhere to stand in the hall. Ethan arrives half an hour before the start. A steel tube containing a map tucked under his arm. A clean shirt. A doublet from Aya. Rhonda's steel quill in his breast pocket. Lyra is by his side. Rhonda follows behind them. In the crowd, Ethan sees the faces of the people he has helped over the past 3 weeks. Walter Blake, the innkeeper. Arthur Penn with his cane. Eliza Price, the widow. William Thorne, the baker. Captain Hannigan by the wall with his guards. Harold Stern in the front row with the merchants. Lord Davenport in a chair by the window. Aya next to her father. In a white dress, back straight, hands on her knees. She sees Ethan and nods, barely noticeable. On the platform in the center of the hall are 2 tables. Standing at the one on the right is Guildmaster Oswald Finch. He is overweight, sweaty. His fingers are trembling. Next to him is Jared Holt, pale. His eyes dart about. At the table on the left stands legate cartographer Cassius Verne, calm, upright, hands behind his back. Unrolled on the table before him is a scroll, the standard atlas of the Valcrest Empire. Section 17, Marrow. Port and surroundings, sealed by the Imperial Academy of Cartography. Verne waits for silence. The hall falls quiet. Verne begins. He says that the purpose of the audit is to verify that the city's actual landscape matches the standard atlas, that any discrepancy is considered potential heresy. That heresy is punishable by a triple tax and the dissolution of the guild. That in particularly serious cases, the guilty parties will face an imperial court. He delivers this as if reading a shopping list, evenly, without menace. The threat lies in the words themselves. Finch is sweating. Jared stands next to him, trying to look confident. It's not going well. Verne unfurls the reference atlas completely. A large sheet, 3 feet by 4. Merroport in detail. Every street, every dock, every boundary. A flat, rectangular projection. The Academy's seal in the lower right corner. Verne begins a methodical inspection. He takes the list of locations. Pier number 1. He checks it against the atlas. The length matches. The width matches. Pier number 2. The length matches. The width, it matches. Pier number 3. Ethan stands in the hall and watches. The layer of truth glows red across the entire surface of the reference atlas. He sees every lie, every shift, every false line. 30% of the map consists of intentional distortions, but Verne isn't comparing it to reality. He's comparing the city map to the standard. And if the city map matches the standard, then the city is clean, even if both documents are lying, because the standard is the law, and the law is not up for debate. Verne reaches pier number 4. The length, according to the standard, is 108 feet. He looks at Finch. Finch is sweating harder. Jared pulls a new sheet of paper out of his bag. The revised pier map. 120 feet. Someone has already updated the guild's map after the incident at the pier. Verne takes the new sheet. He looks at the old one. He looks at the new one. 108 and 120. A discrepancy.
He turns to Finch and asks why the harbor map was corrected without consulting the academy. Finch opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again. He mumbles something about new measurements and how an apprentice made a mistake in the previous version. Vern isn't listening. He jots something down in his notebook. Discrepancy number 1. He continues. The boundary of the Blake plot. Discrepancy. The aquifer at Penn's Well. Discrepancy. The boundary line between the 3 plots on Port Street. Discrepancy. Finch is melting like a snowman in the sun. Jared stands nearby, turning paler with every new note. Vern finishes 2 hours later. 17 discrepancies. 17 places where the city map does not match the standard atlas. Vern closes his notebook and says that 17 discrepancies are sufficient grounds for a triple tax and the dissolution of the guild. The hall falls. The merchants exchange glances. Martha stands by the wall, silent. Thomas is beside her. Arthur Penn grips his cane so tightly it creaks. Vern says the decision will be announced an hour after the recess. Ethan steps forward. He speaks loudly so that the entire hall can hear him. He says he would like to submit an alternative map for consideration. Vern turns toward him. He stares, silently, for 5 seconds. Then he says that alternative maps are not provided for in the audit regulations. Ethan says that the regulations provide a free port with the right to present an independent expert opinion in the event of a dispute over taxation. Paragraph 14, Article 3 of the 7 Ports Commercial Charter. Vern remains silent. He knows this paragraph. He didn't expect an expelled apprentice from the fisherman's quarter to quote it. Stern rises from the front row and confirms it. As head of the Merchants Guild, he officially requests an independent, expert assessment. Vern cannot refuse. It is his right under the charter. Ethan steps onto the platform. He opens a steel case. He takes out a map. He lays it out next to the standard atlas. 2 maps, side by side. The Empire's standard atlas in a flat rectangular projection. Ethan's map in a conic equidistant projection. The hall falls silent. Ethan begins. He doesn't shout. He doesn't accuse. He speaks calmly and methodically, like a cartographer, one feature after another. Pier number 4, 108 feet on the reference atlas. In reality, 120. On Ethan's map, 120. The discrepancy between the reference atlas and reality is 12 feet. The Blake property. On the reference map, the boundary is shifted 4 feet south. In reality, the fence has stood in the same place for 20 years. On Ethan's map, the boundary is correct. The Davenport estate. 340 acres on the reference map, 204 in reality. On Ethan's map, it's 204. The difference is 136 acres. 40% of the area doesn't exist. Ethan goes through each of the 17 discrepancies. The result is the same every time. The map of Finch's town differs from the reference map because, in recent weeks, Finch has begun correcting his forgeries under pressure from the townspeople. But the reference map itself doesn't match reality, because the reference map is just as much a forgery, only older, and bearing the Academy's seal. Ethan finishes. He raises his head. He looks at Vern and says one sentence. Your atlas isn't a map. It's a lie, neatly drawn with a ruler. But I draw what's there. The room falls silent. Vern stands motionless. His face is stony. His eyes don't blink. He looks at Ethan's map, at the scale grid, at the projection, at the lines that are more precise than anything he's seen in 30 years of Imperial service, and he remains silent. Then he takes Ethan's map, holds it up to his eyes, studies the scale, checks the orientation. He counts in his head. Ethan sees his lips move. He recalculates the coordinates of the 3 control points. It takes a minute. Vern puts the map back. He stands motionless for another 10 seconds. Then he says in an even voice that the map presented is drawn in a non-standard projection and cannot be accepted for official consideration as part of the current audit. The room erupts, shouts, a clatter.
The merchants jump to their feet. Hannigan straightens up against the wall. Stern shouts that this is an abuse of power. Vern raises his hand. The room gradually falls silent. Vern continues. He says that, nevertheless, the discrepancies identified between the reference atlas and the city's actual condition require further verification. He recommends conducting a repeat audit in 6 months with the involvement of 2 independent experts. Until then, the triple tax will not be applied. The Marrow Port Cartographers Guild is issued a warning. Finch collapses into a chair. Jared stands nearby, motionless. Vern folds up the reference atlas. He puts it away in its case. He turns toward the exit. He stops next to Ethan. He leans toward him and whispers so quietly that only Ethan can hear him. That evening, Marrowport celebrates, not noisily, not with fanfare, quietly and wearily, the way people celebrate after waiting 3 weeks for a blow that never came. The Old Anchor Tavern is full. Hannigan buys a barrel of stout for everyone. Stern orders a second one. Walter Blake brings 3 from the tavern. Arthur Penn brought some homemade apple brandy, strong stuff. Rhonda is drinking with the blacksmiths from the Brotherhood of the Ruler at a corner table. She's laughing so hard the walls are shaking. The Brotherhood is in full force. 12 men, blacksmiths, bricklayers, carpenters. They look at Ethan as he enters and stand up, all 12 of them, silently. Rhonda raises her mug and says one phrase, "To the master." 12 mugs are raised. Ethan nods. His throat tightens. He's not used to this. Not in this life, nor in the last. He sits down at the table next to Lyra. Lyra has already downed her mug and her cheeks are rosy. She nudges him with her elbow and says he did well. Ethan says he just showed the map. Lyra says he showed the truth, and that's not the same thing. Martha is sitting by the fire. Thomas is next to her. She isn't drinking. She's just sitting there, staring at the fire. Then she starts to sing, softly. The melody is old. The words are incomprehensible. Not in the language of Marrowport, something ancient. Lyra freezes. She recognizes the song. Her mother used to sing it when Lyra was little. A pilot's song. A song of those who steered ships along routes not marked on any map. The tavern falls silent. Everyone listens. Martha sings, and Ethan feels the system shudder inside his head. It doesn't ring, it shudders. As if the song's words resonate with something inside the Atlas of Peace. The song ends. Silence. Then Walter taps his mug on the table and says it was beautiful. Everyone agrees. Martha smiles and says nothing. Johanna sits in the corner and writes in her notebook. She isn't celebrating. She's taking notes. Everything that happened during the review, every word Vern said, every gesture he made, every pause. Ethan approaches her. He asks what she's writing. Johanna says that Vern recalculated 3 control points on Ethan's map in his head in 1 minute. 3 coordinates in a conic projection, in his head, without any tools. She says that in the entire history of the Academy, there have been only 4 people who could do that. 3 of them are already dead. The 4th is the former rector of the Academy, the very same one who expelled Johanna for asking the wrong question. Ethan asks how the rector is connected to Vern. Johanna says that the rector of the Academy is Cassius Vern's father. Ethan takes note. The Vern family. The father is the Academy's rector. The son is a legate cartographer. Vern's father led the second demarcation 40 years ago. He signed the order to erase 30 coastal sites, including Martha Kane's shoal. The son arrived for an inspection in the city where his father's erasures were beginning to come to light, and he whispered a question to Ethan about his ancestor. Do you know whose descendant you are? Vern knows about John Reed. He knows about the heirs of the line. He more than he lets on. And he left alive and undefeated. In 6 months, he'll return. And next time, he'll be ready. Aya shows up at the tavern around 9 in the evening, alone, without a servant, in a simple dress and a hooded cloak. She pushes her way through the crowd and finds Ethan. She sits down next to him. She takes him by the sleeve and doesn't let go. She says that her father has been studying Ethan's map all evening, and that, for the first time in 3 years, she saw him smile. Ethan says he's glad. Aya says that's not all, that her father has made a decision. that the Davenport family will officially file a petition with the magistrate to have the estate's boundaries revised based on Ethan's map. That if the court accepts the map as evidence, the family will get 136 acres back, 40% of the land. Ethan says that's good. Aya says it's more than good, that it's a precedent. The first time a non-standard map has been used as legal evidence against the standard atlas. If the Davenport family wins, every citizen whose property lines have been shifted will be able to do the same. Ethan understands the scale of it. This isn't just one family's lawsuit. It's a war against the system, a quiet, legal one, but a war nonetheless. Aya squeezes his sleeve tighter. She whispers that she wants the House of Davenport to become the official patron of Ethan Reed, that this will protect him from the Guild and from the Empire, that with the patronage of the old house, he cannot be arrested without a trial, he cannot be expelled from the city, his tools cannot be confiscated. Ethan looks at her. He asks why she wants this.
Aya looks him in the eyes and says it's because he's the first person to paint the truth, and that the truth deserves protection. The system beeps softly. Aya Davenport's favor rating is 50. The threshold has been reached. Ethan doesn't know what the 50 threshold means to Aya. He'll find out soon. Rhonda approaches the table with a mug in her hand. Her eyes sparkle from the beer and from what she's about to say. She says that the Brotherhood of the Ruler has held a vote, unanimous, 12 votes out of 12. Ethan Reed has been recognized as a master of the Brotherhood. This isn't a guild license, it's not an imperial charter, it's recognition from the craftsmen. People who work with their hands and know the difference between a proper drawing and a fake one. Rhonda pulls a steel square out of her pocket, just like the one around her neck, small, shiny. She places it on the table in front of Ethan. She says, "Wear this." Ethan takes the square. It's cold, heavy for its size. 4 words are engraved on the back. A true line never lies. The Brotherhood's motto. Ethan hangs the square around his neck. The tavern is buzzing.
Rhonda slaps him on the back so hard he nearly falls off his chair. Lyra laughs, out loud for the first time in 3 weeks. Johanna smiles from her corner. Martha nods from by the fireplace. Aya holds onto his sleeve. Ethan sits among these people and thinks. 3 weeks ago, he was a nobody, an expelled apprentice with 4 copper coins and a scrap of a map. Now he has a workshop, a team, allies, and a map that turned the Empire's audit upside down. But Vern got away alive. And the message from his ancestor burns in his inner pocket. Don't draw the 7th sheet. Ethan gets up from the table. He says he needs some fresh air. He goes outside. The night is warm. The stars are bright. A salty breeze blows in from the sea. He walks toward the pier. He stands at the edge of pier number 4. That very one. 120 feet. He looks out at the sea. In his pocket is a scrap of a map. Ethan takes it out. He holds it up to the moonlight. The writing on the back isn't visible, only when heated. But Ethan remembers every word. John Reed, 1673. Don't draw the 7th sheet. Ethan looks toward the horizon, to where, according to every map in the world, there is nothing but the open ocean. To where 90 miles of coastline are missing. To where the 8th continent has slept for 300 years and is now awakening because Ethan is drawing it back into existence, line by line, sheet by sheet. The wind shifts direction from the east, from the sea, and on the horizon, in the spot where there should be nothing, a light flashes, not lightning, steady, white. The lighthouse beam shines for 3 minutes, then it goes out. The shore dissolves into the darkness as if it had never been there. But Ethan saw it, and the system saw it. A notification flashes in his mind. The 8th continent, and activity detected. Manifestation contour, 12%. Critical manifestation threshold, 100%. Current number of activated sheets, 2 out of 7. Ethan stands on the pier and counts. 2 sheets out of 7. The Trail of Saltbones and Saltbones North, both are activated. The continent has manifested 12%, so each sheet adds about 6%. 7 sheets is 42%, but 100 is needed. So the sheets aren't providing everything. There's something else, something that must complete the map until full manifestation, or someone. In the morning, Ethan goes to see Martha. He sits down in the kitchen. He says he saw the lighthouse. Martha isn't surprised. She sets a mug of herbal tea in front of him and sits down across from him. She's silent for a minute. Then she says the lighthouse lights up every 40 years. The last time she saw it was when she was 11. She was standing on that same pier with her father. Her father said the lighthouse was calling, that it always calls, but you can't go, because those who went toward the lighthouse never returned. Ethan asks how many people had gone. Martha says 4 over the last 300 years, all of them pilots, all from her family. They all set out to sea toward the light, and not a single one returned. Ethan asks why the lighthouse lit up now, not 40 years from now, but now. After he activated the 2 sheets, Martha looks at him for a long time. Then she stands up. She goes into the back room. She returns a minute later. She's holding a bundle, a canvas cloth soaked in wax. Martha places the bundle on the table. She unwraps it. Inside is a parchment, a large one, 3 feet by 2, old, very old. The edges have darkened with age. The ink has faded, but the lines are clearly visible. It's a map, a contour drawing, the coastline, mountains, rivers, bays. No names, no scale, only outlines. Ethan takes the map, and the layer of truth flashes gold. Entirely. The whole map. Every line. Absolute truth. It is the complete outline of the 8th continent. Ethan looks at Martha. Martha says her family has kept this map for 300 years. It was passed down from mother to daughter. Always from mother to daughter. Because the family's navigators have always been women. She is the last one. Lyra is next, but Lyra doesn't know. Martha is silent for a second. Then she says that now it's up to Ethan to decide. The system beeps. Martha Kane's favor. Threshold 50 reached. Ethan takes the outline drawing and carries it to the storage room. He lays it out on the table. Next to it, he places his 2 activated sheets, the Trail of the Salt Bones and the Salt Bones North. He superimposes them onto the outline. They match perfectly. 2 small fragments fit onto the large map like pieces of a mosaic. Ethan sees where the remaining 5 should go. 5 empty spaces on the outline drawing. 5 lost sheets that he hasn't found yet. And John Reed's warning. Don't draw the 7th sheet. 6 is okay. The 7th is off limits. Why? Ethan stares at the map and thinks. Then he summons the system, the Peacemaker's Atlas. Query: what will happen if the 7th sheet is activated? The system responds. Activating all 7 sheets will trigger the full manifestation of the 8th continent. Irreversible. The continent will become permanently anchored in reality. All beings on the continent will awaken. All erased objects will be restored. The geographical map of the world will change irreversibly. Warning: an anchor is required to anchor the continent in reality, a living carrier of anchor blood. Without an anchor, the continent will manifest but will not become anchored, and after 40 days it will disappear again. An anchor, a living carrier of anchor blood. Ethan recalls the system's description of Aya Davenport, a distant descendant of the last king of the 8th continent. The anchor of the map lies in her blood. Without it, the 8th continent cannot take root in reality. Ethan sets the map aside. He sits down on the mattress. He closes his eyes. Everything falls into place. 7 sheets to manifest the continent. Aya's blood to anchor it. And his ancestors' warning, don't draw the 7th. So John Reed knew. He knew what would happen if the continent took root. He knew and didn't want it. Or he was afraid. Or he saw something that forced him to stop at the 6th sheet and die before finishing his work. A knock at the door. Lyra. Without knocking, of course. She just opens it and walks in. She sees the outline drawing on the table. She freezes. She walks over. She looks at it. She says quietly that she recognizes this map. Her mother showed it to her when she was 6. She said it was a fairy tale land across the sea. Lyra believed her back then. Then she grew up and decided her mother had made it up. Ethan says her mother didn't make it up, that it's the 8th continent, that it's real, and that last night Ethan saw it on the horizon. Lyra sits down on the floor next to the table. She looks at the map. She traces the coastline with her finger. She says quietly that her mother spent her whole life looking east. Every evening she would go out to the pier and stand there. She would look. Lyra used to think her mother was waiting for her father, who had drowned. Now she understands that her mother wasn't waiting for him. She was waiting for the shore. Ethan tells Lyra that her mother was the last pilot of their lineage who guided ships to the 8th continent, that Lyra is the heir to that lineage. Lyra is silent for a long time. Then she says that this explains why she always knew where she was, even in a storm. Why her instinctive course corrections turned out to be more accurate than any map. Why she sensed currents and shoals with her body before she saw them with her eyes. It's not a talent, it's a legacy. Ethan nods. Then he says he needs her help. That in 2 weeks he plans to set sail to the lighthouse, to the shore of the 8th continent, and he needs a navigator who knows how to navigate routes that aren't on any map. Lyra looks up. She looks him in the eyes and says she'll need a bigger boat. 2 weeks of preparation. Ethan is working on 2 fronts at once. The first front is public. The Davenport house has filed a lawsuit in magistrate's court. Ethan's map has been admitted as evidence. The first hearing is in a month. The Merchants Guild has ordered a full audit of all the port's trade maps. Ethan has assigned the work to Johanna under his supervision. Johanna is working under an alias, Hannah Wright. Simple, inconspicuous. She checks the maps during the day and recounts the tables at night. In 2 weeks, she found another 23 discrepancies in Merrow Port's trade maps. The total loss from the fake maps over the past 10 years amounted to approximately 4,000 gold pieces, money that flowed from the pockets of merchants and townspeople into the guild's treasury and onto the empire. Stern read the report and turned pale. Then he flushed. Then he said the matter would be raised at the next council of the 7 guilds. The second front is secret. Ethan is preparing an expedition. Lyra found a boat, the sloop Salty Cat, 12 meters long, 1 mast, a gaff sail, a sturdy hull. It belongs to an old fisherman, Neil Hartley, who is retiring and is willing to rent out the boat for 3 silver coins a month. Rhonda reinforced the rudder and replaced the rigging blocks. She installed steel rivets instead of bronze ones. The Ruler Brotherhood supplied 10 days' worth of provisions: water, salted meat, hardtack, and dried fruit. The crew consisted of 4 people: Lyra, the helmswoman, Thomas, the deckhand, Ethan, the navigator, and a 4th person Ethan hadn't expected, Sylvia Dumont. She showed up on the 3rd day of preparations. She simply walked up to the dock and stood next to the boat, tall, slender, dark hair down to her shoulders, a long, sand-colored cloak, a pipe in the corner of her mouth, green eyes with flecks of gold. She's 29. She introduced herself as a merchant of rare inks and parchments. She said she'd heard about Ethan from the 7 Ports Trading League, that she had ink from the 8th continent, the real thing, ink that doesn't fade, ink that stays on the parchment forever, and that she's willing to sell it for a reasonable price, or trade it for a spot on the expedition. Ethan looks at her, and the veil of truth flares strangely. Not red, not gold, gray, murky, like fog. Ethan has never seen a gray glow before. The system says the subject is partially truthful, partially lying. Sylvia isn't lying completely, but she isn't telling the whole truth either. Ethan accepts her onto the expedition because he needs ink from the 8th continent, and because it's better to have a mysterious person by his side than behind his back. Sylvia brings the ink the next day. 3 vials, dark blue, thick. They smell of salt and something else, something old. Ethan tries the pen with the new ink. The line is perfect. It doesn't smudge. It doesn't fade. And the system reacts. Ink from the 8th continent has been detected. The TrueLine's efficiency multiplier has been increased by 50%. The cost of restoring objects has been reduced by 1/3. Ethan closes the vial and hides it in his bag. This ink changes everything. With it, he can do more for fewer points. Sylvia watches him with a smile. She's smoking a pipe. She says nothing. Ethan notices that she's carrying an old quill in her breast pocket. It's worn, with dried ink on the tip. Not hers, someone else's. She doesn't use it, she just carries it, like a talisman, or as a memento. Before setting sail, Ethan gathers everyone together. Evening, Martha's house, kitchen, Lyra, Martha, Johanna, Rhonda. Aya has come secretly, without a servant, wearing a hooded cloak. Sylvia is standing by the door, smoking. Ethan lays out Martha's contour map on the table. Next to it, his map of Marrowport. Next to that, 2 activated sheets. And next to them, the scrap of paper that started it all. He says that tomorrow they set sail, heading east, to the point where Johanna calculated the 90-mile stretch of missing coastline, to the lighthouse, to the 8th continent. The goal is to find the 3rd lost sheet, not to activate it, to find it, to understand what's on it, to understand why Ethan's ancestor warned against drawing the 7th. Johanna is staying in the city. She's continuing to audit the maps. Rhonda is staying. She's maintaining contact with the Brotherhood. Aya is staying. She's covering for Ethan's absence before the magistrate. Martha stays, because Martha always stays. She's the guardian, not a traveler. Aya approaches Ethan as everyone disperses. She takes his hands. She says she'll wait, that the Davenport household stands behind him, that when he returns, she wants to tell him something important, but not now, when he returns. Ethan says he'll return. Aya nods. She squeezes his hands and walks away. The system beeps softly, but Ethan isn't looking at the numbers. Some things can't be measured in points of favor. The morning of departure. Dawn. The Salty Cat rocks at the dock. Lyra is on board. She checks the rigging. Thomas is loading the last barrels of water. Sylvia stands at the stern, looking east. Martha is on the dock. She hugs Lyra for a long time. Then Thomas. Then she turns to Ethan. She hugs him too. She whispers a single phrase softly into his ear. "Take care of my children." Ethan nods. Martha lets him go. The ropes are cast off. The sail is hoisted. The Salty Cat leaves Marrowport, heading east, toward the horizon beyond which there is nothing, or perhaps everything. The wind is favorable. Lyra steers the sloop confidently. Her hands are on the helm. Her eyes are narrowed. She isn't looking at the compass. She senses the direction. Ethan stands at the bow with a map in his hands, Martha's contour map, the coastline of the 8th continent. If Johanna's coordinates are correct, it's 90 miles to shore. With a tailwind and a speed of 6 knots, that's 15 hours. They should see land by dawn the next day. The first day at sea passes calmly. The waves are low. The wind is steady. The sun is beating down. Sylvia is sitting at the stern, writing something in a small black notebook. Ethan notices but doesn't ask. Not yet. By evening, the wind picks up. The waves grow higher. Lyra frowns. She says the current feels strange. Not what's on the charts. Not what she remembers. Something is pulling the boat southeast. Ethan checks the coordinates. They've deviated from course by 7 degrees, a current that isn't on any chart. Sylvia approaches and says calmly that it's the tidal current of the 8th continent, that it appears when the continent begins to emerge, that they shouldn't fight it, but go with it. It leads to shore. Ethan asks how she knows this. Sylvia smiles and says she's been trading ink from the 8th continent for 5 years now. She's been to its shores 3 times. Each time, the current carried her. The gray glow of the layer of truth around Sylvia pulses. She's telling the truth, but not the whole truth. Lyra adjusts the course. She follows the current. The boat picks up speed. 7 knots. 8. The wave carries them southeast. Night. Stars, the moon, and on the horizon, light again. A lighthouse, steady, white, closer than yesterday, much closer. Ethan stands at the bow and watches. The system shows the distance, 34 miles to shore. They'll be there by dawn. Dawn. The shore emerges from the fog as slowly as a photograph developing in a solution. First, the outline, a dark line between the sky and the water. Then the details. Cliffs, white, chalky, 200 feet high. Above the cliffs, greenery, thick, dark. Trees Ethan doesn't recognize. Their trunks are silvery. Their canopies are broad. The leaves move in the wind, but there is no wind. Lyra stands at the helm and says nothing. Thomas stands on the foredeck and says nothing. Sylvia stands on the stern and smiles. She's been here before. Ethan looks at the shore, and the layer of truth flashes. Not red, not gold, white, pure, blinding white. The system says this is territory not marked on any existing map. Terra incognita, absolute. And one more notification. Lost leaf number 3 has been detected. The Cathedral of the Tides. The coordinates match the current position. The sheet is available for collection. Lyra steers the skiff along the shore. The cliffs stretch westward, eastward, unbroken, no coves, no place to land. The current carries them southward along the shore. 20 minutes later, Ethan spots a gap in the cliffs, a narrow strait, 60 feet wide. The walls are vertical, chalky. Birds are perched on the tops of the walls, white, large, with a wingspan of 6 feet. They don't move. They look down at the boat with black eyes. Lyra steers the skiff into the strait. The water is calm. The current disappears. Silence. Only the lapping of water against the hull and the creaking of the rigging. The strait stretches 400 feet. Then it opens up. A bay, round, half a mile in diameter. The water is crystal clear all the way to the bottom. Rocks, sand, and something else are visible on the seabed. Ethan looks down. Walls on the seabed, foundations, streets, a submerged city. Right beneath them, at a depth of 30 feet, lies a city of white stone. The buildings are uniform, symmetrical. The windows are dark. The doors are open. Seaweed grows on the roofs. Fish swim between the walls. The city is dead and submerged, but its walls are intact. 300 years underwater, and not a single sign of destruction, as if someone had covered it with water neatly and carefully, as if it had been preserved. Lyra drops anchor in the center of the bay. They sit on the deck and look down at a city that shouldn't exist. Sylvia says this is Kale As, the port of the 8th continent, the capital of trade. 300 years ago, 40,000 people lived here. There was a university, there were shipyards, there was a lighthouse, the very same one they saw at night. When the Empire carried out the Great Survey and wiped the continent off the map, the water rose and submerged the city. Not instantly, slowly, over the course of a week. The residents managed to escape, some of them. The rest stayed behind. Ethan asks how she knows all this. Sylvia remains silent. Then she pulls a quill from her pocket, an old one, with dried up ink. She says this quill belonged to the man who brought her here for the first time, 5 years ago. His name was Marcus Shadow, a smuggler, a cartographer. He found the way to the 8th continent using old pilot charts. He brought the ink. He started drawing. He drew one extra line, and he burned, literally. The ink flared up. The parchment flared up. Marcus flared up. A system rollback. He tried to draw something that had never existed, a figment of his imagination, and the system burned him. Sylvia held his hand as he died. Ever since, she's been carrying his quill. Ethan listens. A golden halo of truth glows around every word Sylvia speaks. She's telling the truth, the whole truth, for the first time. Ethan asks why she's really here. Sylvia is silent for 10 seconds. Then she says she was sent. The Order of the Flat World, a shadowy organization within the Empire. The ones who, 300 years ago, carried out the Great Survey and wiped the 8th continent off the map. They know about Ethan. They know about his ability. They know he's the heir to the line. And they sent Sylvia to watch him. And if he gets close to the last pages, to stop him, at any cost. Lyra jumps to her feet. Her hand rests on the knife at her belt. Sylvia raises her hands. She says calmly that she has no intention of stopping him, that she has made a decision, right here on the deck, right now. She pulls a folded sheet of paper from the inner pocket of her cloak, a report, sealed, with the order's wax seal. She holds it up to the flame of the oil lamp on the mast. The paper flares up. It burns for 5 seconds. The wind carries the ashes away. Sylvia says that Marcus was the only person she ever loved. That the Order had sent her to watch over him, too. That she didn't manage to save him. That she won't let this happen again. The system beeps. Sylvia Dumont's favor. Genuine. Threshold 20. Ethan nods. He accepts it. He doesn't forgive because there's nothing to forgive yet. But he accepts it. Lyra removes her hand from the knife. Slowly, without taking her eyes off Sylvia. Ethan wades into the water. The bay is shallow near the shore, chest deep. The water is warm, salty. He walks toward the shore. White sand, seashells, and on the shore, among the rocks, stands a stone pedestal. Low, round. A parchment lies on the pedestal, rolled up, tied with a string of seaweed. Ethan picks it up, unrolls it. The lost sheet, number 3. The Cathedral of the Tides. The sheet shows a map of the underwater city of Kale As. Every building, every street, every square, and in the center of the city, the cathedral is marked. Large, round, with a dome. According to the map, there is something inside the cathedral. The system identifies it as an anchor point. Ethan looks at the map, then at the flooded city beneath the water, the cathedral in the center. At a depth of 30 feet, to reach it, they'll have to dive. He turns toward the boat. Lyra is already taking off her boots. She's read his mind. Or maybe she just knows what's coming next. They dive together. The water is crystal clear. You can see everything. The city streets are straight, wide. The stones are white, smooth. There are reliefs on the walls of the buildings. Waves, ships, birds, people. The city was beautiful. 300 years ago, this place was full of life. The cathedral stands in the center. The dome is intact. The doors are wide open. Inside is a hall, tall, impressive even underwater. And in the center of the hall, on a stone altar, lies a book, a large one, leather-bound, closed. Ethan swims toward the altar. His lungs are burning. 30 seconds. He picks up the book. It's heavy, even underwater. He turns around and swims upward. Lyra is right beside him. They surface at the same time. They gasp for air. They swim toward the boat. On deck, Ethan opens the book. The pages are dry. The water hasn't touched them. 300 years at the bottom of the sea, and not a single page has gotten wet. The paper is from the 8th continent. It's different. There's text in the book. Not in the Meropore, not in Imperial. In a language Ethan doesn't know. But Sylvia does. She leans over the book and begins to read, slowly, translating word by word. It is a chronicle, the final days of the 8th continent, the account of the Supreme Keeper, Kale As. Sylvia reads, and her voice trembles. The chronicle states that the 8th continent was not wiped out by force. It was wiped out by mutual agreement. The continent's rulers themselves asked the empire to carry out the demarcation because something was awakening on the continent. Not creatures of salt, not walkers, something else. Something was right at the very center of the continent, beneath the mountains, beneath the earth. A being they called the cartographer, the first, the one who drew this world. He had slept for 1,000,000 years, and he began to awaken. And the rulers realized that if he woke up, he would redraw the world anew, in his own way, without people. The erasure of the continent was not an attack, it was a quarantine. The continent was erased so that the first cartographer would not wake up. Ethan closes the book. He sits on the wet deck. The sun is blinding. Lyra is beside him, wet. She's silent. Sylvia stands there smoking. Her hands are shaking. That's why John Reed wrote, "Don't draw the 7th page," because the 7th page will complete the map. The continent will be fully revealed, and the first cartographer will wake up, and he'll redraw the world. The return trip takes 2 days. The wind is against them. Lyra struggles with the sail. Thomas is bailing water from the hold. Sylvia is silent and smoking. Ethan is sitting on the bow with the chronicle in his hands, reading.
Sylvia has translated the first 40 pages out of 120. Ethan is memorizing every word. The first cartographer, the being who drew this world, literally, every mountain, every sea, every river. The world of Airedale is his map, his drawing. He drew for millions of years. Then he grew tired and fell asleep, and while he slept, people appeared. They came onto his map, they built cities, they laid roads, they lived for thousands of years, and forgot that they were living on someone else's drawing. The first cartographer sleeps beneath the mountains of the 8th continent. His sleep keeps the world stable. As long as he sleeps, the map does not change.
But when someone draws the true lines on the 8th continent, the vibration reaches him. Each line is like a knock on the wall. One line is a rustle. 2 lines are a knock. 7 sheets are a rumble, enough to wake him. Ethan counts. 2 sheets are activated. The 3rd has been found but not activated. The continent is 12% revealed. The first cartographer stirred but did not wake up. If all 7 are activated, he will wake up. If he wakes up, he will start drawing all over again. And everything that people have built over thousands of years will disappear. Like a drawing on a blackboard that's wiped away with a rag. No, worse. It won't disappear. It will be redrawn. Mountains will rise where there used to be plains. Seas will flood the continents. Rivers will flow in the opposite direction. Cities will end up underwater or inside rocks. People. Ethan doesn't want to think about what will happen to the people. Marrowport. Salty Cat enters the harbor at sunset on the 2nd day. On the pier, Martha, Rhonda, Johanna, Aya in a cloak, Hannigan. Everyone was waiting. Ethan goes ashore, and the first thing he sees is Rhonda's face, somber. She says that while he was away, 3 things happened. First, Master Finch filed a complaint with the Empire regarding Ethan's actions during the audit. The complaint was sent by courier 4 days ago. A response will arrive in 2 or 3 weeks, but everyone knows what the response will be. The Empire will declare Ethan a heretic topographer. A bounty will be placed on his head. Second, Jared Holt has disappeared. He left town the day after Ethan set sail. No one knows where he went. Rhonda suspects he went to Leggett Vern, with a denunciation, with details, with coordinates. Third, Johanna found something in the Merchant Guild's archives, an old document, 300 years old, a treaty between the Order of the Flat World and the Council of Elders of the 8th Continent, signatures, seals, and one phrase that changes everything. The contract stipulates that the erasure is reversible if 2 conditions are met. First, the heir to the line must activate all 7 sheets. Second, the bearer of anchor blood must voluntarily enter the Cathedral of Tides and utter the word of anchoring. Without the second condition, the continent will manifest but will not be anchored. In 40 days, it will fade away. The first cartographer will not wake up. He will stir, he'll turn over in his sleep, but he won't wake up. Ethan listens. Then he asks what voluntarily means. Johanna says it means without coercion. The bearer must decide for himself, enter on his own, utter the word himself. If he's forced, the word won't work. Ethan looks at Aya. Aya stands to the side, unaware of what they're talking about. She doesn't know that the anchor of the 8th continent runs through her veins. She doesn't know she's a descendant of the last king. She doesn't know that without her, the continent won't be anchored. Ethan makes a decision. He won't tell her, not yet, because knowledge is pressure, and pressure is a lack of freedom, and the choice must be a free one. Ethan gathers everyone at Martha's house that evening, the kitchen, the table, fish soup, bread. He tells them about the Chronicle, about the first cartographer, about the quarantine, about how the erasure of the continent was not an attack, but a defense. Everyone listens in silence. Martha nods. She knew. Not everything, but she knew the most important part. Her family didn't just keep a map. They kept a lock on the door, behind which sleeps a being capable of redrawing the world. Rhonda asks directly, "What should we do?" Ethan says he has 2 options. First, Do not activate the remaining sheets. Leave the continent at 12%. In 40 days, it will fade back away. Everything will return to the way it was. The Empire's maps will remain false. Marrowport will remain under threat. The Saltbone Trail will disappear. The shoal in the strait will vanish. Everything Ethan has restored will disappear along with the continent. Option 2. Activate 6 of the 7 sheets. The continent will manifest at over 80%, but it won't take hold. Not completely. The first cartographer will turn over in his sleep, but will not wake up. The 8th continent will exist, partially, unstable, but it will exist. And all the restored objects will remain. The shoal, the trail, the walker's burrow, the city of Kaelas, the lighthouse. Everything will remain, on the edge, between dream and reality, as if someone had drawn a map in pencil but hadn't traced it with ink. Lyra asks, what if 6 sheets aren't enough? What if 80% of the continent is unstable and starts to crumble? Ethan says he doesn't know, honestly. Sylvia says she knows, that Marcus activated 1 sheet, and that was enough for 5 years of stability. 1 sheet is 6%. 6 sheets are enough for several decades, maybe a century, maybe forever. No one knows for sure, but it's better than nothing and better than everything. Martha is silent. Then she says that her family has guarded the castle for 300 years and that she trusts Ethan to decide what to do with it. Rhonda says that the Brotherhood will support any decision. Johanna says that mathematically, 6 leaves provide the optimal balance between manifestation and safety. Aya says she doesn't understand half of what was said, but trusts Ethan. Lyra remains silent. Then she says 1 word, draw. Ethan nods. 6 sheets, not 7. The line drawn by John Reed. Stop 1 step short of the end. Don't finish the last line. Leave the world imperfect, but alive. For the next 3 weeks, Ethan draws. The missing sheets arrive one by one. He finds the 4th in the archives of the Merchants Guild, sewn into the binding of an old trade journal. Sylvia brings the 5th one. She had kept it for 5 years. Marcus's quill was the key. Inside the hollow shaft of the quill was a rolled-up parchment. The 6th one comes from Vern. Yes, from Legate Cassius Vern. A courier delivers a sealed package. Inside are a sheet of paper and a note. The note contains a single sentence. My father erased this sheet in 1683. I am returning it to its rightful heir. Ethan unfolds the 6th sheet. The layer of truth glows white. Absolute truth. Vern has returned the lost sheet, not because he had switched sides to Ethan, because he realized it was pointless to keep it any longer. The continent is returning, whether the Empire likes it or not. Better that it be controlled by a man who doesn't kill the Saltwalkers, but charts a path home for them. Ethan activates the sheets, one by one. The 3rd, the Cathedral of the Tides. 23 ink points, including the discount from the 8th Continent's ink. The 4th, the Silver Forest. 27 points. The 5th, the Kale Asa Lighthouse. 19 points. The 6th, the First Keeper's Pass. 31 points. Each activation shakes the earth, not violently, but noticeably. Marrowport is getting used to the earth's tremors, just as one gets used to the rain. The lighthouse burns on the horizon every night. The coast of the 8th continent is visible to the naked eye. Mountains, forests, cliffs, everything is just like in Martha's sketch. Only now it's not a sketch, it's reality. More than 80% of it. The creatures are waking up. 3 walkers emerged from the salt peaks. Ethan is drawing burrows for them. They're leaving, peacefully. The title guardian rose from Kaelasa Bay, a massive figure made of water and seashells, 60 feet tall. Lyra rode up to it in a rowboat and showed it a map of the cove. The guardian looked at it and lay back down on the seabed. It guards the cathedral, just as it did 300 years ago. Ethan is sitting in Martha's storage room. There are 6 activated sheets on the table. His inventory shows 0 unactivated ones. He didn't find the 7th sheet. It's not there. And that's as it should be. Ethan isn't supposed to find it. John Reed made sure of that 350 years ago. He hid the 7th sheet so it couldn't be found. The system shows 8th continent, manifestation 84%, stability moderate, time until decay indefinite, first cartographer, status deep sleep, activity minimal. Ethan shuts down the system. He exhales. 6 out of 7. The line has been drawn. Not all the way, but enough. The world has changed, not completely, but irreversibly. The 8th continent exists, partially, on the horizon, between sleep and reality, with a lighthouse that burns every night, with a city underwater, with trails and burrows and creatures that sleep and wake and fall asleep again. Ethan made his choice. He didn't finish drawing the last line. He left the world imperfect, but alive. A month passes. Merroport is changing. Not quickly, slowly, just as the shore changes with the tide. The Merchants Guild won the review of the trade charts. All of Master Finch's distortions have been documented and handed over to the magistrate. Finch has been removed from office. Jared Holt never returned. Rumors are circulating that he's in the capital, that he's writing denunciations, that he's seeking the protection of the Order of the Flat World. Ethan isn't worried. Let him write. The Davenport house won the lawsuit. 136 acres have been returned to the family. Lord Henry is sleeping soundly for the first time in 3 years. Aya walks through the city with her head held high and smiles so brightly that passers-by turn to look at her. The imperial governor is furious, but can do nothing. A precedent has been set. Within a month, 14 more families filed similar lawsuits. Ethan's map has become a legal weapon, silent, precise, and irresistible. The Council of the 7 Guilds has voted. Merroport has declared itself a cartographic autonomy, a first in history. The city was permitted to use its own maps for internal legal and commercial purposes. The imperial standard applies only to intercity trade. Ethan was appointed the first master of Merroport's new Cartographers Guild. Rhonda chose the name, the Guild of the True Line. 12 members of the Ruler Brotherhood joined on the very first day. Johanna became an Atlasarian, officially, under her real name, because Aya, through her father, secured a letter of protection from the magistrate. Johanna's son is under the protection of the city of Merroport. Imperial arrest warrants are not valid within the port's territory. When Johanna found out, she sat in the attic and cried for an hour. Then she went down to the storeroom and signed her name next to Ethan's on the city map. A fellow member, just as she'd dreamed. The Salt Bones Trail is up and running. Caravans are traveling through the mountains to bypass customs. 3 caravans a week. Cloth, iron, tools, spices. Prices in Merroport have dropped by 30%. People are eating meat. Children are eating fruit. Old Arthur Penn fixed the well and is now watering the garden. The apples are big this year. The salt walkers sleep in their burrows. Sometimes at night you can hear them tossing and turning. The ground trembles. People have gotten used to it. They say the walkers appear in dreams. Maybe it's true. The tidal guardian lies at the bottom of Kailasa Bay, guarding the cathedral. Lyra takes boats full of merchants there, not to the cathedral, but to the bay. The fish there are big and tasty, and they're easy to catch. It's as if the sea wants to feed the people who have returned. The Empire has sent a decree. Ethan Reed has been declared a heretical topographer. A bounty of 10,000 gold pieces is on his head. Ethan read the decree and hung it on the wall of the storeroom next to the city map. Rhonda said it was the most expensive picture frame in the history of Merroport. The Imperial Legion marched out of the capital. 5,000 soldiers, 200 cavalry, siege engines. Their target? Merroport. Suppressing heresy, arresting Ethan Reed, restoring order. Ethan learned this from Sylvia. Her contacts in the Order of the Flat World were still active. The Order didn't want a military solution. The Order wanted peace. But the Empire was no longer listening to the Order.
Ethan sits in the storage room and does the math. The Legion is marching along the Imperial Highway. Speed, 25 miles a day. 300 miles to Marrowport. A 12-day journey. Ethan has 12 days. And 340 ink points in reserve. And 6 activated sheets. And an ability he's used exactly once. Cartographic focus. Once a week. Radius of 3 miles. Cost, 80 points. Allows him to redraw a section of the world. Move a bridge. Shift a trail. Hide a village from others' maps. Or hide a city. Ethan spreads the map of Marrowport out on the table. He takes Rhonda's steel pen, dips it in the ink of the 8th continent, and begins to draw. Not a new map, a different version of the old one. A version in which Marrowport stands in the same place, but the road leading to it takes a different route. A turn 3 degrees further south. A fork in the road that wasn't there before. A signpost leading to a dead end. A hill blocking the view of the port from the highway. Not a trick, not an illusion, just a different road. One that used to be here, before the Empire built the straight highway. The old road meandered. It wound its way. It disappeared into the woods and emerged near the swamps. The locals knew every turn. Strangers wandered for weeks. Ethan is restoring the old road, the true line. Cost, including 8th Continent ink, 54 points. Then a cartographic focus, 80 points. A 3-mile radius around the city. Marrowport disappears from Imperial maps. Not completely. The city is still there. The people are still there. The port is still operating. But if you're traveling along the Imperial Highway with an Imperial map, you won't find the turnoff to the city. The road leads right past it, through the forest, through the swamp, to a fork in the road that sends you back. The system beeps. Cartographic focus is activated. Marrowport is hidden from the Imperial cartographic grid. Duration, indefinite. Cost, 80 points. Current reserve, 206. Ethan sets down his pen. The Legion will arrive in 12 days, and they won't find the city. They'll circle the old roads, searching for a turn that isn't on their maps, and they'll leave. Because you can't lay siege to a city that isn't on the map. In the evening, Ethan steps out onto the pier. Sunset. The sky is red and gold. The sea is calm. On the horizon, the shore of the 8th continent appears as a dark strip. The lighthouse is shining, steady, white, every night. Lyra is nearby, standing shoulder to shoulder, silent. Then she says that her mother has begun teaching her the old routes. Pilot routes, the ones passed down from mother to daughter. Routes that aren't on any maps. Routes that lead through straits and shoals and currents that no one else can see. Lyra says she likes it, that for the first time in her life, she feels like she's doing what she was born to do. Ethan says she's the best navigator he knows. Lyra nudges him with her shoulder and tells him not to exaggerate, but she smiles, with just one corner of her mouth, as always. Johanna approaches with a notebook. She says she's finished surveying the entire coastline. All 90 miles of the restored shoreline have been plotted on the new map, a conic projection. The margin of error is 0.2%, the best result of her life. She hands the notebook to Ethan. On the last page is a drawing, a complete map of the Airedale coastline, including the 8th continent. For the first time in 300 years, all 8 regions of the world are depicted on a single sheet. Johanna signed it with both of their names. Ethan Reed, Johanna's son, co-masters. Rhonda arrives with the blacksmiths. The Brotherhood of the Ruler has grown. Not 12, 40, from Marrowport, from neighboring cities. Artisans who've heard of the cartographer who draws the truth. Rhonda says they're ready. When the Empire tries again, when the legate returns, when someone else tries to erase what must not be erased, the Brotherhood will stand. Rhonda pats Ethan on the back, as always. Sylvia stands on the roof of Martha's house, smoking. She looks east, toward the shore of the continent she showed Marcus 5 years ago. Marcus didn't come back. Ethan did. Sylvia takes Marcus's quill out of her pocket. She holds it in the palm of her hand. Then she walks over to Ethan. She places the quill in his hand. She says that Marcus would want his quill to keep drawing. Ethan takes the quill. It's old, lightweight, with dried ink on the tip. Ink from the 8th continent. He tucks it into his breast pocket, next to the Brotherhood's steel set square.
Aya is the last to arrive. In a white dress, her hair is down. She walks across the pier straight toward Ethan. She doesn't hide. She doesn't put on her hood. She walks openly, in full view of everyone. She approaches, takes his hands, says that the House of Davenport is officially becoming the patron of Master Ethan Reed and the Guild of the True Line. That this is her father's decision and her own. That from this day forward, his house is their house. His enemies are their enemies. His cards are their shield. Then she stands on tiptoe and kisses him on the cheek, in front of Lyra, in front of Rhonda, in front of Martha, in front of Johanna, in front of Sylvia, in front of the 40 blacksmiths of the Brotherhood, in front of the fishermen, in front of the merchants, in front of all of Marrowport. Ethan stands on the pier and feels his cheek burning, and he feels the system humming quietly and joyfully. But he isn't looking at the numbers. He's looking at the horizon, at the shore of the 8th continent, at the lighthouse shining with a steady white light. The continent hasn't fully awakened, 84%, not 100. The first cartographer sleeps, deeply, peacefully. The world is imperfect. The map is not finished. The 7th sheet has not been drawn. And that's how it should be, because a finished map is a dead map. A living map is always a work in progress, always unfinished, always with room for a new line. Marta steps out onto the pier. She's the last one. She stands next to Ethan. She looks out at the horizon. Then she speaks softly. "My family guarded the castle for 300 years. You didn't open the door. You drew a window." Ethan smiles. For the first time in both of their lives, he feels like he's standing exactly where he's supposed to be, with a pen in his pocket, with a map in his hands, with people who believe in him behind him, and with the shore on the horizon that's waiting, not demanding, just waiting. Marrow, the harbor is falling asleep. Lights are going out in the windows. The sea roars. The lighthouse shines. Ethan stands at the edge of pier number 4, 120 feet, he counted. In his pocket, a scrap of John Reed's map, 1673. Don't draw the 7th sheet. Ethan didn't draw it. He stopped. Not because he was afraid, because he understood. The world doesn't need to be drawn to completion. The world needs to be drawn correctly. One pier at a time. One sandbar at a time. One trail at a time. For a specific person. For Martha and her son. For Rhonda and her brother. For Aya and her home. For Johanna and her question. For Lyra and her sea. The map of the world will never be finished. And that's the best thing about it. Ethan takes Rhonda's pen out of his pocket. Steel, precise, heavy. He holds it in his right hand. He looks at the horizon, at a shore that hasn't existed for 300 years, at the lighthouse that shines for those who know where to look. And he says quietly, to himself alone, "Well, let's see what happens next." The wind from the east carries the scent of salt and silvery trees. A wave crashes against the pier's pilings. Marrowport sleeps. The 8th continent breathes on the horizon. And somewhere deep within the Peacemaker's atlas, a line glows faintly. Lost pages in inventory, 0 of 7. Activated, 6 of 7. The 7th page. Status. Hidden by Heir John Reed. Location, unknown. And below, another line, one Ethan is seeing for the first time. A new soul awaits a meeting. Name unknown. Location, Kale Asa Pier. A woman in a white cloak. Waiting time, 300 years. Ethan reads the line, then he closes his eyes. Then he opens them. Somewhere across the sea, on the pier of a sunken city, a woman in a white cloak has been waiting for him for 300 years. But that's another story, and this one ends here, at the edge of the pier, with a pen in his hand, with the city behind him, with the continent on the horizon, and with a simple thought worth every drop of ink in the world. I'm not drawing a map at all. I'm drawing a map for a specific person.